I thank you in advance for your adherence to the safety measures in place so this meeting can happen safely. I also thank those members of the public that join us today for housekeeping arrangements. If the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate via the doors behind you and congregate at a safe distance outside near the park. Please raise your hand if you wish to speak during the meeting. We will make a note of this and call you to speak at the appropriate time. If you are wearing face masks, it may be more difficult to identify you, so I may call you by location. Please identify yourself by name and division before you speak. When you are invited to speak, a roving mic will be brought to you. If you wish to make a point of order, please stand to do so. For regular votes, I will ask members to verbally indicate their support, i.e. all those in favour say, say aye. Those against say nay, and then I will ask for any abstentions. If the vote appears to be close, I may ask for the raising of hands. I must ask that everyone ensures that their mobile phones and other devices are turned to, silent. Done it, good. Turn to silent for the duration of the meeting. This includes laptops. I would also ask members that if you must leave the meeting before it is concluded, please sign the attendance sheet by the entrance to indicate when you left, as is required by the Constitution. Thank you. I will now open the meeting and ask for the broadcast to begin, and when it is confirmed broadcast has begun, I will start the meeting. Thank you. Good morning. I am Stuart Wheeler, the Chairman of Wiltshire Council. I would like to welcome members and the public to this meeting being held on the 19th of October 2021. I confirm this meeting is being recorded and broadcast live to the public, and I refer everyone to the notice regarding this included with the summons. I would ask that all members of the public follow the instructions provided on COVID arrangements during the meeting. I have received apologies from Phil Alford, Richard Britton, Howard Greenman, Nick Holder, Bob Jones, Laura Mays, Ashley O'Neill, Stuart Parman, Pip Riddart, Jonathan Seed, Martin Smith, Ian Thorne, and Mr. Gordon, Councillor King is acting as Liberal Democrat Group representative, and finally Mary Webb. Is anybody aware of any other absentees? If so, Sarah Gibson, thank you. Is that right? She's there, right, okay, that was a bit premature there. Anybody else? Councillor Piazza, thank you. Right, jolly good. Right, moving on. Item 2 on the agenda is minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of July, shown on pages 7 to 23 of your summons, be confirmed as signed as a true and correct record.
I'm happy to second that.
Are there any objections to those minutes being signed, approved by assent of the meeting? I see no objection. The minutes are therefore approved. Item 3, does any member have any disclosable interest to declare to this meeting? I see none. Thank you very much indeed. Right, announcements by the chairman, item 4. Before I move to my usual announcements, I wanted to start by passing my personal condolences and those of everyone at Wiltshire Council, whether they be councillors or employees, to the family and friends of Sir David Amess MP following his tragic death last week. We were shocked and saddened to hear of his death, and our thoughts and prayers remain with everyone who knew him and worked with him. And it is worth noting he died doing what a good MP should be doing, which was listening to his constituents and engaging with them in person. And I salute him for that. Moving on your screens behind, on your screen behind me, on a screen in front of you, will be a list of some recent engagements that have been attended by both myself and the Vice Chairman, which will be included in the minutes. I just wanted to single out one of them because I think it's worthy of particular mention, which is the one on Tuesday, the 5th of October, 2021. One school in each county has been singled out to receive a tree in recognition of the Queen's Green Canopy celebration. That tree in Wiltshire was Pembroke Park Primary School in Devizes Road, Salisbury. They received a very handsome oak tree, which I was delighted to say I helped the Lord Lieutenant plant, complete with tree guards and everything. The entire school were there to see the tree planted, and I think that it was an absolutely tremendous occasion, and the weather was kind. What I want to recommend to you, and if you attend anything when the Lord Lieutenant is present, she will be recommending to you even more firmly than I, is participating in the Queen's Green Canopy, which means you've all got to plant at least one tree and then register it. And I'm going ahead and planting, apparently we're planting an apple tree. Apart from that, it's been, as you can see in my engagements, that was tremendous. Right, any members who are laying a poppy wreath on behalf of the council, those will be available for members in the members' room immediately following this meeting. Finally, I have a motion. We have a number of items on this agenda that would usually require a recorded vote under our constitution. I would ask that the council agree to suspend the requirement to undertake formal recorded votes which will require a roll call, as we are outside our normal venue of the council chamber, which I sincerely hope we will be back in February, where we can record votes automatically. I therefore move a motion to suspend paragraphs 22.6.2 and 22.6.4 of the Constitution, removing the requirement for automatic recorded votes on these items.
I'm happy to second that, Chairman.
Thank you very much. All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say no. No. And all those abstaining, please indicate. One abstention. Thank you so much. I therefore confirm that motion is carried. All right, now we move on to petitions, which appear on pages 31 to 35 of your agenda. 3 petitions have been formally received by the council since the last ordinary meeting of the council. 1 petition to stop plans for 1,200 houses on the Salisbury Road, Amesbury, will be presented to the meeting. It will not be subject to debate. 3 members of the public have registered to make a statement on this item. I will call on them in turn to speak for up to 3 minutes each. The first name I have is Mr. Guy Leach. Thank you.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
My name's Guy Leach. I live in West Amesbury. I've lived there since 2005 and since 1991 nearby. We're here today presenting this petition on behalf of over 1,000 people who've signed it, mostly residents of Amesbury and the surrounding areas. This was collected in response to the publication by the Council in September of the results of the Regulation 18 consultation on the draft local plan between January and March this year. And in that consultation, 3 large new sites south of Amesbury on the A345 were tabled by owners and their agents on the main road between Amesbury and Salisbury to propose getting them shortlisted in the next iteration of the local plan as potentially rezoned from agricultural use to development land. They're large, they're all large sites. Viney's Farm is immediately south of Amesbury, 182 acres, being proposed for 1,200 residential units. High Post North, 146 acres, being proposed for industrial use. High Post South, 355 acres, being proposed for 500 residential units plus other uses. These proposals came as a surprise to local people. We're petitioning on this now. We know that this isn't a live application, and we know that these sites haven't been shortlisted, but they have been proposed during the last consultation phase and are now obviously in the public domain. And the council's now working on the pre-submission plan for the next round of consultation, and we believe the decision's in early 2022. So we want to make you aware of the strong local opposition to these sites. We obviously didn't get a chance to do so in the last consultation because they were submitted during it. And we want to make known to you that there's a lot of opposition to all of these, and simply to request that you don't shortlist them in the next iteration of the local plan. There are 3 of us speaking, so we've kind of split up some of the other points between us. On housing need, Amesbury at the moment has a need of 350 units, not 1,200 units. And there are other sites that have already been published by the council, which can accommodate more than that. Amesbury's had a huge increase in housing development in the last 10 years or so, almost all to the south of Amesbury, Archersgate and Kingsgate, and it is now classified as a market town in the local plan, although it doesn't have a market square. It's essentially an overgrown village, and a lot of the opposition to the proposed rezoning from the public has been based on lack of resources. So GPs, dentists, and particularly secondary schools. There's one secondary school in Amesbury, 800 pupils. It stops at GCSEs. There's a sixth form college in Salisbury. So we obviously recognise the council has to meet its obligations to housing need. We think it can based on the sites that have already been built, and that these new ones should not be short-lived. Thank you for the opportunity to present our case that these big increases in housing are not needed in Amesbury, and that these sites we think should not appear in the next iteration of the local plan. If they do, we will obviously continue to campaign against them. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Leach. Secondly, Mr. Simon Connolly, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, councillors. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. I want to talk briefly about two of the biggest reasons why we think that the proposal for new homes off Salisbury Road in Amesbury would be inappropriate. Firstly, there's the wildlife and ecology question, and secondly, there's the sustainable transport issues that surround that site. The land to the south of Amesbury is beautiful, and it's a protected landscape. It's listed as an SLA by the council. It runs right alongside the River Avon, which is one of only 16 rivers designated as special areas of conservation in England, and is also a site of special scientific interest. The Avon is one of 160 chalk streams only in the country, and it's home to a number of very rare, very threatened species, including invertebrate plants, etc. Atlantic salmon, lamprey, the Moulin's wall snail, mayflies, they're all susceptible, and they're all also susceptible to a deterioration in the water quality that they rely on. There are ongoing issues around discharge of sewage at West Amesbury and Rapfin already, which obviously would not be, how shall I say, benefited by the addition of 1,200 new houses. The 1,200 houses or homes would be harmful to habitat, both in terms of the load put on it by those inhabitants, but also water runoff straight from the roads and the driveways, collecting oil, road salt and other chemicals and dumping it straight in the river. That inevitably will have a severe effect on the wildlife. On land, the site is home to stone curlew, lapwing, snipe, warblers and cuckoos, all of which are endangered species. Secondly, on the transport front, one of Wiltshire's key priorities is that development should be sustainable in transport terms. We can say with absolute confidence that this site does not align with Wiltshire Council's priorities. In terms of walking distances, it's between 25 and 40 minutes walk to the high street from all parts of the proposed site. All walking journeys to the local facilities exceed the 20 minutes generally taken as the outer limit of acceptability, and some of them are up to 50 minutes long. The walking routes that do exist around the site are steep, and that will always be the case. You can't grade away the downs. They're unsuitable for families and older people. You know, if you're in a wheelchair, if you're pushing a buggy, good luck with that. The road that the pedestrian ways into the town would rely on is very busy. The A345 it's a dangerous road. There's a lot of traffic. All in all, any development on the site would inevitably result in a large increase in car traffic, van traffic, increasing carbon emissions, worsening air quality, and therefore we're asking that the council prioritise sites that are more sustainable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Connolly. You hit 3 minutes, just about. Hang on the button. Finally, I'd like to ask Mr. Anthony Wells if he would like to speak.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Anthony Wells. I'm a councillor at Durnford Parish Council, which is an adjoining parish to Amesbury, which is affected by these. I'm here to talk about the developments at what is known as Viney's Farm and also at High Post. First of all, Viney's Farm. This is a development of 1,200 homes. As you will have seen from the petition that's been submitted, there is a lot of strong feeling in opposition to this. The landscape around Amesbury enjoys a special protection due to its relationship with the Stonehenge and Amesbury World Heritage Site. The land put forward, comprising these 1,200 homes, sits on a prominent site, on a site that is equivalent to 117 football pitches, and is directly adjacent to and has views to and from Stonehenge. The site is also within the special landscape area, meaning that Wiltshire County Council recognises the need to protect this landscape being of countrywide importance. Furthermore, it is now our understanding that archaeologists have identified that Viney's Farm is likely to be rich in archaeology, containing the remains of a Bronze Age barrow, possibly a Roman religious site, and pit alignment. I hope the Wiltshire Council is carefully considering this issue when evaluating this proposal. The same considerations also apply to the proposed development at High Post. These comprise two proposals for a large and unsustainable development. They comprise 500 houses and over 160,000 square metres of industrial land. These proposals go far beyond what is required in terms of identified housing and the need for employment land. In conclusion, councillors, we are here to engage with the local plan constructively. As has been demonstrated by the petition, the people of Amesbury and the surrounding parishes did not get a chance to comment on these proposals in the last consultation because they were late submissions. Now we are aware of it. As the petition will demonstrate, there is a strong feeling in opposition to this, and that we are as a community prepared to protect our very special and protected landscape from the developers. Thank you for your time. We wish you the best in preparing a sound plan driven by this evidence.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Wells. I therefore now invite Councillor Nick Botterill as the relevant Cabinet member to provide a response to this petition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Leach, Mr. Connolly, and Mr. Wells, for the time that you've taken to come here and to make your case most eloquently. And I and other councillors have noted your points and your opposition. As Mr. Leach expounded, the council is currently in the middle of a process, the process of reviewing the local plan, and this is a process which is has to be carried out in line with national legislation. So whilst I hear what you say and note what you say, and confirm that we will keep those notes of what you say, I can't actually comment on the process at this moment, but as I will say in answer to some questions which are coming later, consultation will be undertaken on the draft plan in due course, and when it comes out, and you will be obviously aware of that at that time. That's all I can say at this moment, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Botterill. I now therefore ask that Council notes the update on the petitions in the report shown on pages 33 to 38 of the agenda, and that the Council receives the petition, which we've just heard from the petitioners, receives the petition presented to the meeting.
Seconded, Chairman.
All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say nay. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you very much indeed. We now move to item 6, public participation. My understanding is that the members of the public who submitted questions are not in attendance if they, and therefore nobody is registered to make a statement. Am I correct in that? The ones I have, questions, Mr. Curtis and Mr. Beard. Who is the gentleman with his hand up? Who is? No, this is public participation. This is nothing to do with, we haven't reached the item yet. 10B is the item you're waiting for. I'm currently on item 6. Thank you. So at the moment, the only question there is, as far as I understand it, there is no member of the public attending who has submitted a question. It's Mr. Curtis and Mr. Beard. I don't know, Mr. Botterill, do you want to respond to the questions that were submitted by Mr. Curtis and Mr. Beard? Or do you want to respond in writing?
I can make a verbal response to that, and it's very much on the lines of the response which I've just given to the petitioners. Cabinet considered the outcome of the local plan review consultation at its meeting on the 29th of June this year, and in the light of the consultation response, it was agreed that further work would be undertaken to develop the evidence that would inform the draft plan, including testing upper and lower levels of housing need and spatial distribution of growth over the plan period. And this work is ongoing. And so it is, as I've just said in response to the petition, it's too early. We're simply not able to confirm what the level of growth and the allocations will be at Amesbury. The draft plan is, of course, being prepared in line with legislation and national planning policy, and consideration is given to many different factors, including landscape character, when considering locations and sites for development. And the draft plan will be based on evidence and brought back to Cabinet and to full Council for approval. And so that's at that time, Cabinet will be able to provide confirmation on the proposed spatial strategy in this area. Further consultation will then take place on that draft plan, and local people and all the others will have the opportunity to comment and put forward their views. So, you know, we are constrained in what we can say at this moment in time. But thank you very much for your question.
Okay, Councillor Botterill, thank you very much indeed. There are no further public questions, so I'm moving on to item 7 on the agenda, which is the Corporate Parenting Panel Annual Report. And I would ask initially Councillor Peter Hutton, as Chairman of the Corporate Parenting Panel and Portfolio Holder for Safeguarding, to introduce and remove the report. Councillor Peter Hutton, will you please present and move your recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So before I start the summary to full council showing and highlighting the last year's work of the Corporate Parenting Panel, I would like to formally move the item as item agenda 7, set out on pages 39 to 92, and will seek a formal seconder.
Seconded by? There we are. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Councillor Hutton, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's always a privilege being Chairman of the Corporate Parenting Panel, and I want to set out the work of the panel over the last 12 months. And finally, at the end of my summary, I will be introducing 2 members of people to come to you to provide an insight into the work, and also then to finally show you a slideshow highlighting the report and bringing the report to life. The Corporate Parenting Panel remains committed to and focused on 8 strategic priorities to deliver better outcomes for children, looked after and care experienced young people, making sure the right support is in place. They have been written by our young people and are as follows. Number 1, a loving home where I have good relationships, respect and the opportunity to see my family. Number 2, to have links with my local community where I am trusted, respected and accepted. This means I can access the local community and I'm not left out. Number 3, to feel and be safe. Number 4, support with my mental health, especially at school, at a time and a place that suits me and not services. Number 5, support to be healthy, and this includes opportunities to be involved in new activities. Number 6, support to be the best I can. Number 7, support for as long as I need it. And number 8, to be heard. My voice is not the only way I'm heard. It may come out as my behaviour. I think all councillors will resume to look at those 8 priorities and understand they have great meaning to our looked after children. And I'm sure we all support them. And I know the corporate and parenting panel members entirely endorse that. This year has seen the development of the Child and Youth Voice Team, ensuring the voice of children and young people are heard in all we do. And young people have attended and contributed to the panel at different times, and I thank them for doing so. Our children and young people have remained stable in their homes with strong performance around placement stability, and where a young person has had to move home, the majority of moves are in line with our care plan. The Fostering Excellence programme has shown a significant growth in our in-house fostering households to enable more children to remain living locally in Wiltshire. Online fostering campaigns have taken place, and we now have fostering road shows which have begun around the various towns in Wiltshire. Like most children, our children's education has been impacted by COVID-19. Over the last 18 months, however, schools and settings remained open for children looked after, and they worked closely with the virtual school, foster carers and the child's social worker to minimise the disruption as far as possible. School attendance for our children has remained strong throughout the period of the pandemic and benchmarks very well against statutory neighbour and England averages. In the 2019 Ofsted inspection, where our services were judged to be good, there were 5 recommendations for how we can improve services. The Corporate and Parenting Panel has monitored and noted continued good progress in all these areas. As a council, we strive to continuously improve our progress and achieve the best outcomes for children and care experienced young people. And as I say, as the chairman of the panel, it is a great privilege to meet many of our young children and indeed our very hard-working officers who between them have produced this report, and my congratulations to everyone involved. And as I said at the beginning of my summary, I would like now to bring this report to life. So I would like to welcome Joe Sutton and Cameron Strawson, who are in the building, who will then introduce themselves and go through a very short slideshow highlighting what I've just mentioned to full council. So Joe and Cameron, welcome.
Hello. Just wanted to start off by saying thank you for having us, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to come along and tell you about some of the really great work that we're doing. So as Councillor Hutton just mentioned, our team was formed in April, or launched in April this year, and so far we feel we've done some really great work to drive forward the participation of young people. Can you go to the next slide, please? So our team launched in April. Currently, myself and Cameron are working in the team, and we're care experienced. So that gives us the added benefit of being able to really empathise and understand what children that are currently looked after by Wiltshire are going through, and build relationships. We also have 5 care experienced consultants that are currently care leavers in Wiltshire, and they help us do things like youth inspections, presentations, training, etc. And we're also lucky enough to have 30 voice ambassadors across the local authority that drive the voice work in their teams forward. Next slide, please.
Hi everyone, Cameron Strawson. I'm a child and youth voice support worker, and thanks for having me here and having us here. And I'm now going to talk to you a bit about the Children in Care Council. So I'm sure a lot of you are aware this has been a huge part of the work that we have done to support young people in care for a while now. And we're very excited to say that we're going to revamp it and relaunch KIC in a much more exciting and friendly way for young people to participate. So there are currently over 20 children in care involved in this, and we're working towards relaunching the Children Care Council as an activity club, which will involve monthly activities that are fun and allow young people to come together in a very nice way, rather than obviously sitting at a kind of a meeting and discussing. This is a safe place where they can give their views, and all you councillors are obviously invited to come along and chat to our young people and hear what they have to say.
Next slide, please.
And we also recently did a really fun PGL residential, so this, it doesn't abbreviate for anything, it's a fun activity centre in Swindon. So we took 18 children in care here for a fun-packed weekend, and all the participants were children in care, so this is a great way to reward them for their hard work, for their GCSEs, etc., and for their participation in the Children Care Council as well. And it was a great way to promote our Children Care Council and recruit new members. And we also found out from this that we have lots of very talented children in care.
Next slide, please. So we recently have done a consultation at Aspire House with the Children Care Council. Aspire House is a short break residential home run by Wiltshire Council, and they take children for a short period of time and give them a break. So what we've done is linked them up with Children in Care, our youth consultants, and ourselves, and worked with them to make the home more friendly. They've redecorated. They've also listened to some of our black and ethnic minority young people who said that, you know, they'd like them to have a prayer mat, and they'd like them to have to be more inclusive in the home. So the consultation has really made a difference to those young people that will be using that setting. Next slide, please. One of our care leavers, Fran, has started a podcast, if anybody would like to listen to it. It's called Fostering Positivity, and that's where care experienced adults will go on there, talk about issues such as mental health, foster placements, lots of important issues to children in care, and that will be available for professionals, children in care, care leavers alike to access and learn from. Next slide, please.
So we've also been working on the app called Mind of My Own, which is a very important part of children's services and really helps get the views of young people involved in the services. And we've aimed to relaunch this. I know it was launched in 2017, but we're really moving it forward, and we want to get all young people heard and all staff on board. So to really show the impact of our work and the impact this has on young people and getting their views. Within the first quarter period, Wiltshire, we are very proud to say, was the top user out of 450 services across the UK. So this really shows kind of the impact of the work. And we are also offering 2 hours of inspirational training, which really promotes this to all staff, and we want to get all staff on board. Next slide, please.
Just lastly, we wanted to talk about our new Wiltshire Youth Council that is going to be launched as of next year, which will give young people from different schools within Wiltshire a chance to be elected as their school's youth councillor, and come along and do similar roles to you and link in with the councillors at the local authority. This is to enable them to get their views heard in a really positive way and expose them to democracy and expose them to participation in the greatest sense. What we will also be doing is having special advisors on the Youth Council, so these young people don't necessarily have to be elected, but they have to be from some sort of disadvantaged background. So we're hoping that one of our children in care would like to come along and sort of wave the baton for children in care on the Youth Council. That's a really exciting scheme, and if anybody wants to find out more about the Youth Council, please get in contact with our team. Thank you.
As you can see,
Sorry, lost the slide.
Oh, you got on.
Sorry.
Do your fashion bit.
Oh, we're also having a fashion show, sorry.
You were the fashion.
Sorry, everyone. The fashion show is for children that are looked after. Every year we have a Star Awards. This is a celebration event for the children in care to really celebrate all of their achievements, what they've done throughout the whole year. And what we'll be doing is enabling children in care to put on a fashion show, the music. There's going to be a theme in terms of fashion through the ages, and it will really highlight that actually children in care aren't just a statistic on a paper. They're not, they're not just somebody that we talk about in a meeting. They're real life people. They go through real, real things, and they actually want to give back and they want to contribute. So we're really looking forward to working with them and putting on that show.
Thank you, Joe. Yes. Can I personally thank Joe and Cameron? Obviously, that was a very brief summary of the year's activity, but I think hopefully you've taken from that there are wonderful opportunities for our looked after children, and increasingly so from all the hard work, not from just these two, but all the team involved. And again, thank you to the corporate and parenting panels. Just one final plea for me as chairman. You would have seen in one of the slides reference to the Youth Council. All area boards and community engagement managers now have all the information in relation to how this is going to work. And as councillors, and as indeed you all are corporate parents, I would ask you to promote this to your local schools. I know many of you have great connections with your schools and other community groups. So please, when you see this information come through to your area boards, can you promote it? Can you make sure that your school in your community area is aware of it? And indeed, they put up a candidate. And as I all know that everyone in this room is passionate about elections, I'm sure you will get behind all those candidates running for council, and we will see a wide and varied candidate selection for next year's elections. So on that note, I would like to commend this report to the council, and I'm not sure if there are any questions, but happy to take any if there are. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Hutton, and thank you very much, gentlemen, for your great presentations. It's really good. Thank you. I have received no public participation, no questions or statements received regarding this item. So now, do the group leaders have any comment they would wish to make? Councillor Kluwer.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And thank you very much to the officers who've just given us the presentation and showed us what's going on. Whilst the bulk of this work, the work looking after this area is carried out by the corporate parenting panel, every year Laura would make the point, and it would be remiss of me not to make the point on her behalf, that we are all corporate parents. We all, as elected members, have a responsibility here and a role to play, and it's an area we should all be interested in and keep looking at. There's a great deal of work going on every year. It's always interesting to see the new directions that are being taken, the work that's being built on. I was always taught PGL meant parents get lost. Perhaps that's just my daughter not wanting me to say, yeah. The Wiltshire Youth Council, I think this is a really good initiative. If I remember back to when I was first elected, I was portfolio holder for youth and skills, and I can recall with Jane Scott, a number of sessions held in the council chamber where we had young people in, and Jane was trying to fire them up to demand free swimming and to listen to them and get them to be explaining what their issues were. And this is, I think, a very good way of formally bringing that back and making sure that we are continuing to explore that. So again, I would urge all of us to make sure that we are talking to our schools and that they are engaged with the process. And aside from that, it's great work, really good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kluwer. Councillor King.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is not really my area, but nevertheless, like everybody else, I acknowledge my responsibility as a corporate parent, as does everybody else in my particular group. And we all would say that we stand really in awe of all those people who work and serve in this area, and in that vein do welcome this report this morning. Like Richard, I am pleased to hear about the Youth Council and the work that will be progressed through it going this morning. I know that there are one or two of my members who might afterwards follow up a little with one or two questions on the details within the report, but nevertheless we do welcome it and thank those who put it together for such a worthy annual statement. Thank you.
Councillor King, thank you very much. Councillor Clark.
Nothing to add, Chairman.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Chairman. I think all of us in this room will welcome and commend this report. In just a few words we get to say doesn't really seem enough to thank the elected members and the officers who carry out this really difficult task. There is no magic formula, you know, for a looked after young person. You know, each have individual needs, and this team have to work and promote and work with those young people and provide services and facilities. It was great to hear some of the new initiatives. I think that was really interesting. And, you know, like I say, I can't say enough about the work that our staff team do to support young people. So thank you very much on behalf of the elected members.
Councillor Rogers, thank you very much indeed. Now, before I open the item to debate, I'd ask Councillor Hubbard, would you like to speak now, or would you like to speak when he's heard the debate, if you see what I mean?
I'll do now, Chair.
Fine, very right. Thank you. Councillor Hubbard, Chairman of Children Select.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Council. This was the first of the reports that was taken to Children Select's new standing task group to try and allow us more opportunity to go in depth into reports. So can I start by thanking the officer who came along and survived about an hour and 20 minutes of quite in-depth scrutiny by the task group, and I think it was really positive that we were able to look into this to the extent that we were. What was also very pleasing to see was of the 15 recommendations that the task group made about the report and potential changes or things that we felt should be there, 13 of those were adopted. One of them, we got the reply, we can't get that in next year, but it will be in future reports, which was more than reasonable. And one hasn't been actioned, but I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get that again in future reports. It was a big ask for the timescale to get it in for this year. So from a scrutiny perspective, we're really grateful that what we had to say was listened to and actioned. Some of the highlights that came from scrutiny and identifying is we were very pleased to see the extent of the data reporting in there this year. In the past, the report has focused very strongly on the stories and how members have worked to help make those 8 objectives get reached, but it hasn't perhaps actually looked at some of the core performance data as much as it could have done, and it was good to see that back in there again in detail and really being able to dig into and seeing how well our team was doing. What was also fantastic to see in that report, and at this point I want to give real credit to Joe and Cameron, who, I don't know if they're still here, there we are at the back, who really have come in with a new sense of passion and vigour in terms of listening to the voice of our young people. But what was good to see in this report, as ever before in fairness, was the voice of the young person coming through. And one thing Wiltshire Council has always been strong at, and it's good to see that we're investing in developing this further, is listening to the voice of that young person and those young people in care. I don't think, unless you're care experienced, and I'm not, although I had foster brothers, but I think unless you're care experienced, you can't begin to understand the journey that those young people who are in care go through. And it's really important we do listen to them and we do hear what they're saying. Some areas for growth, some areas for improvement. It's that long-standing one of narrowing the gap. There's still too big a gap between the average achievements of young people in care and young people living in birth homes. And we've got to continue to explore and fight that battle of how we can better the opportunities and aspirations for any young person coming through care, and give them every opportunity that we can. I just want to add one point to, I think, Ian, what you just commented, not Ian. I'm having a mental breakdown on names, but yes, thank our members for what they do, thank our staff for what they do, but most of all, thank our foster carers for what they do, because these young people who are living in care, they can only have the fantastic opportunities that we give them because of these phenomenal people who live in our community and open their homes up to young people and say, come and live with us and be part of our family. And for these young people to be told that they can be part of a family is so, so important. A massive shout out to those foster carers. And if I might just make one personal observation at the end, Chair, I just want to echo the comments about we are all corporate parents. And I really want to stress that to every single councillor. It's not the corporate parenting panel. The corporate parenting panel is a team that have got some specific responsibilities to drive forward, but there are 98 elected members who are corporate parents on this council, and every one of us has a responsibility. And I beg you, please, to become aware of what that responsibility is if you're not already, and make sure you're watching out for the young people in care who live in your divisions. And very finally, this new youth council is so exciting. It is so exciting. It is a real opportunity for the voice of the wider young people in our community to be heard. I'm lucky enough to be on one of the groups that's helping put this together. I saw an email the other day that gave me a list of schools who are so far involved. It's not big enough. If you're in touch with your local school, go and talk to them, particularly your secondary schools. Go and talk to them, ask them if they're involved. If they're not involved, ask them why. Why don't they want their young people's voices heard by this council? We need to make sure that every school, every area in our community is represented on that voice, that youth council, because that way young people really will play a part in what we do. But I thank you, I commend the report, and will certainly be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Hubbard, thank you very much indeed. Right, now I now open this item to debate. I would ask anybody wishing to speak to please indicate by raising a hand or standing up. Raising a hand there. Jackie Lay. Councillor Lay, pardon.
So I'm the Vice Chair of Children Select, and obviously if you want to see what Children Select's task group recommended, that report will be obviously on the Children Select Committee. What I wanted to say is I want to obviously echo everything that everybody has said about our corporate children. We are corporate parents to a group of looked after children, but we also have a lot of children who aren't quite yet there, and we need to be aware of them. Sorry, I'm a bit emotional because last night I found a 15-year-old runaway. She'd run away because her mother didn't understand her. She was lost, cold, hungry. She is one of many children who are not provided for, perhaps in their homes, in the way that the average child perhaps is, or perhaps even some of our corporate children are. So I think we need to be aware as councillors of this other cohort of children who we don't yet know about and who we need to be there to support and help them through the process of being identified. And I think it's something that Children's Select need to look at. Again, I know we do.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Anybody else wishing to speak, please indicate. I can see no hands, so I would ask Councillor Hutton if he has any comments before we move to the vote.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chairman, just to say I think Councillor Ray has summed it up. There's a lot of emotion around our looked after children, quite rightly. We are working and striving, as you've seen today, to improve the offering to our young people, and I hope all councils will see a benefit in the next year of more things that are able to our young people to have, and I look forward to presenting the report next year.
Councillor Hutton, we look forward to you doing so, I hope, without being overly optimistic. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any against, please say no. Any abstentions? That motion is carried. Right, we now move on to the gambling, item 8, gambling statements of principles. I would ask Councillor Richard Clure, the leader, to introduce and move this report. The report is at pages 91 to 153. Councillor Clure, would you please move your recommendation?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I need to present this on behalf of Councillor O'Neill, who's not able to be here today and would be presenting it otherwise. We, as a licensing authority, are...
Sorry, do you have a seconder?
Oh, sorry, you want to move it first? Sorry, Chair. I so move the items as listed.
Councillor Boswell seconds. Thank you, Chairman. Apologies, Richard. On you go.
No problem. We're, as a licensing authority, we are responsible under the Gambling Act 2005 for licensed premises. It's really important to get that distinction. We are not responsible in any way for the operation of online gambling, and that falls under the responsibility of the Gambling Commission. We need to maintain an up-to-date statement of principles with regard to gambling. The up-to-date statement is presented in the papers. There have been some minor changes, and they really are minor changes since last time. There's nothing significant or substantive here, certainly from what I can see and what I've been told. The changes are limited to, on page 5, the introduction and update to the current number and makeup of gambling premises in Wiltshire, and then in Appendix D, where there's an addition of a sentence, and Appendix E, an updated address. This has been through the licensing committee. There have been no issues raised there. It's relatively formulaic as a paper coming to full council. I don't know if members will have any questions or issues to raise, but I would just reiterate that we are looking here merely at licensed premises and not at online gambling, in case people wish to stray into that area where you'll need to refer that one to Westminster.
Councillor Clure, thank you very much. I assume that covers any comments you would wish to make as well. Thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is a 3-year statement which we must comply with under the 2005 Act as Richard outlined. I think we are generally satisfied that about the adequacy of the statement in general, although we would point out that some of the maps are a bit shaky. And this one here, on page 151, which is the Wiltshire area profile, is just plumb wrong. So I hope that some revision of the information on these maps will be revised before the final version is produced or sent off. If you'd like an example, you know, at Westby, which is my community, is shown that a location of a hospital which was closed in 2012, bulldozed in 2019, and no longer exists. So, you know, so there is a number of things on this map which are not correct, and I do hope that they are corrected.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Clark.
Nothing to add, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark, and Councillor Rogers. Nothing to add. Thank you. I will open the item to debate. Anybody wishing to speak, please indicate. Councillor Hutton.
The thorny issue of online continues to come to licensing committee and others, but I think what we've heard from the previous agenda item, we are conscious as a council of the online cyberbullying effect on our young people and indeed all our community. So we are aware of online campaigns, clearly it does not sit under this council. So it is something that we do not dismiss lightly, but clearly doesn't involve this particular principle. So I do commend the principle to the council.
Thank you very much indeed. I think I saw Councillor Belcher. Wait until you're audible.
Helen Belcher, Colsham Pickwick. Thank you, Chair. So just to add to what Councillor King has added, the map on page 5 of the report, page 101 on the bundle, has interchanged Laycock with Corsham. So when you get basics like that, then it makes it slightly difficult to understand, you know, where the accuracies or inaccuracies may be elsewhere in the report.
Thank you very much indeed. I now believe Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Chairman. When I was ploughing my way through the agenda yesterday, I reflected on how incredibly long the agenda is, considering how little business we're considering today. If you look at other councils, the statement of licensing principles often takes up no more than 15 or 20 pages. We're at nearly 60 here, and we have no special complexities in this council that mark us out as any different from any other authority at all. So my plea really to our officers is that we really do need to have much more concise reports that actually deal with the facts and the matter in hand. And it would have been useful for this report, really, to just have the statement of the licensing principles. And as a general sort of procedural matter, if you need to put a lot of extra additional information in, surely the way to do it is in appendices at the back. So for reasons of bureaucracy, reasons of cost, I just hope in future that as a general principle, we can try and make sure that our officers produce reports that are succinct and deal with the matter in hand.
Councillor Dean, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? I see no one, so I would ask Councillor Clure if he has any comments before we move to the vote.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, Helen, Councillor Belcher, very good point. Can I ask that if anyone's got issues on the map, can they please email that, perhaps email it through to Ashley, and I'll ask him to get that collated and make sure the map is adjusted appropriately. Councillor Dean's comment, I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused. The report is 4 pages long. The rest of the information is the statement of principles that we're being asked to approve. So I don't think a 4-page report is particularly long. I thought it was a good, concise, well-written report that certainly when I had to read it at short notice, gave me a very clear understanding of the agenda item we were looking at.
Councillor Dean, you wish to raise a point?
Point of order, I was referring to the statement of principles, and I thought I made that clear. If I didn't, I apologise.
Thank you.
The statement of principles is much more robust.
Your point is noted, Councillor Dean.
No, thank you.
When I press my button. We now move to the vote. So I would ask all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, no. All those, any abstaining, please indicate. Thank you very much. We now move to item 9 on the agenda, which is a constitutional update. I would ask Councillor Ian Blair-Pilling, as the relevant Cabinet member, to introduce and move the report that you will see in your papers. Oh, it's changed, sorry. My notes haven't caught, but you're absolutely right. How could I confuse them? Councillor Pauline Church, the relevant Cabinet member, will introduce and move the report. Cross the name out everywhere else. The report for the item is, however, on pages 155 to 157 of your summons, and I would ask Councillor Church to please present and move the recommendation, moving it first, being seconded, and then presenting, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the new Ian Blair-Pilling, so I would like to move, please, the proposal that Council delegates authority to the Monitoring Officer following consultation with the Leader of the Council to amend Part C of the Constitution as appropriate to include terms of reference for Stone Circle Shareholder Group. And I'd like a seconder, please.
Seconded, Councillor Clure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This paper sets out a constitutional update in response to the governance review on the Stone Circle group of companies, which has taken place over the last 6 months and was approved by Cabinet on the 27th of September and the Leader on the 5th of October. Approval is sought from Council to introduce a new subcommittee of Cabinet called a shareholder group to act as a conduit between Stone Circle and the Council. Fundamentally, this change in constitution seeks a clearer separation of roles between council as shareholder and the companies as separate legal entities. In doing so, it brings into sharp focus the commercial mindset of Stone Circle and its relationship with the council, while ramping up delivery of affordable housing for the benefit of Wiltshire's residents. In order to ensure the Stone Circle governance review decisions are implemented as soon as practicable, full council is therefore asked to delegate approval of the terms of reference for the shareholder group as a Cabinet committee to the Monitoring Officer, following consultation with the Leader of the Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Church. Now, do group leaders have any comments they wish to make? Councillor Clure.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just briefly, when we set Stone Circle up, as a new company, we were very careful to make sure that the council had a control over what was going on and was able to make sure that it was firmly influenced, firmly steered through the first couple of years. The intention was always to move over to a slightly more hands-off management and the appointment of directors with a greater skill set, particularly as the development arm of Stone Circle got going. Stone Circle itself now has a significant number of properties. I've got the number 47 stuck in my head, but it does change from day to day, so that number's probably out of date. And as we continue to acquire new properties inside the company, and therefore there was always an appropriate point at which we should be moving over to a model where we are looking at Stone Circle standing on its own feet, having its independent directors with a relevant experience in the housing industry, both in the rental sector and particularly in the house building sector, which is a difficult market to play in, and you need that experience. And this is the point to do it. The council still has 100% ownership of Stone Circle. We still set the business plan for Stone Circle, so we still have control over the company, but we now need to make sure that it has the relevant skills, the relevant tools to deliver the priorities we set for it. And that's the process we're going through today.
Councillor Clure, thank you so much. Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We absolutely agree with that and welcome this, actually. This is a timely and appropriate change to be made in the development of Stone Circle. You know, we are in accord here. It enables the right people to be in the right positions, in the right place, to make the right decisions based upon commercial information and in accordance with their experiences. So this is absolutely the right thing to do, and I do commend it to Council.
Councillor King, thank you. Councillor Clark.
Nothing to add, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Rogers. I will now open the item to debate. Anybody wishing to speak, please indicate. Sorry. Where are we?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Adrian Foster for the Sheldon
Sorry,
ward.
Councillor Foster, I'm looking
That's
at
okay.
a map upside
No, that's
down.
fine. I'm a newbie, and that's why my question is maybe a little on the naive side. Just could you clarify the ethos and the principles for Stone Circle? Because in the reading, obviously, rented houses will be 90% of the market rate. I don't know how often that will be set, but there will be some houses built to be sold as well. Do we know what percentages will be for renting and building a stock of social housing, and what percentage will be for being built for the sale, and i.e. for profit? And will we be selling those to a priority group and at a discount?
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Do you want to respond now, Councillor Church?
Yes, I would, Chair. Thank you. And thank you for your question, Councillor Foster. I might just hand over to the leader, as he has more understanding around the social rents and affordable rents. But certainly it will be dependent on when it comes to house building, certainly the viability within a certain area. So there may be different percentages and priorities depending on, and also on the need in that particular area. But I'll hand over to Richard just to give more clarity for you.
Yes, thank you. When we set Stone Circle up, there were two elements that we were looking at. Firstly was the fact that there are some areas of failure in the housing market, and those are areas that it's very hard to address through council housing. Council housing comes correctly with lifetime tenure, which, if you're looking at a house that you need someone to be stable in, is great. But when you're looking, for example, at the first house that a care leaver moves into, lifetime tenure in a shared property isn't necessarily appropriate for a long period of time. Also, one of the issues we were trying to address there was around care workers. There are parts of the county where care workers, it's extremely difficult to get care workers as things stand, and housing is a particular issue. It's an issue certainly that Salisbury Hospital raise on a regular basis. And therefore, we were looking to try and address a need there that we could have housing that would be available for people while they were fulfilling those roles, but that didn't mean that they could stay in there forever, because we wanted to make sure that housing was available to fulfill those roles. So that was the rationale for the rental. We looked at as close to affordable rent as we could. In essence, it's 90% or little under 90% of the local housing allowance, which isn't the same as market rent. Let's not get into that discussion. It's a complex one. It's an issue that's regulated centrally, regulated nationally, and will adjust accordingly. It follows a set formula in the same way that affordable rents do. When we look at development, we were selling bits of land that needed to be developed and letting other people develop them. It was taking a long time, and we weren't making as much profit for the council as we could. And the reason that we then looked to create a development company was to enable us to take land that we owned where it was appropriate for us to develop. And not all the land we own is. Some of it's complex, and some of it isn't. But where we had relatively simple sites, to develop it so that we would then be able to, through employing relevant developers, but then take a greater share of that profit back for the council, rather than seeing it lost through the sale of a land into a speculative developer. The amount will vary, but it was significant. We were talking perhaps 80% extra return to the council on bits of land, and it will vary from site to site because viability is an important issue. Where we're doing that, we need to comply with planning regulations. So we will be providing whatever affordable housing is required under planning regulations. Whether it is then sold to the council as council house, the housing revenue account, or whether it's sold to another developer under 106 will depend on negotiations on the site. We wouldn't want to fetter the housing revenue account, and equally we've got to make sure that there's appropriate competition when it comes to people wanting to bid for 106 agreement housing. So yes, there will be affordable housing coming out of it. It will be handled in the appropriate way. Any discounted ownership would be classed as affordable housing, whereas the rest of the open market housing will be sold at full price as it would by any other developer. So you'll get, ideally, the 40%, but it will depend on sites and it will be subject to the usual viability.
Thank you, Councillor Clare. Councillor Foster, you've now got a lot of information to work with. I call Councillor Hubbard. Anybody else wishing to speak, please indicate. Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Dean and Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. It's just a technical question. I've got no issue at all with the principle of what's happening here. It's just a technical question in terms of, as I understood it, the existing arrangements that there are in terms of oversight of the management of Stone Circle included cross-party representation. If this goes into a subcommittee of Cabinet, then by default, that will mean that it is singular party scrutiny of the new board that will be taking place, which is the administration's prerogative. But could I ask, through you, Chair, for an assurance that what we won't have is the meetings of the subcommittee happening behind closed doors, therefore preventing any interested opposition members from being able to participate in scrutinising what is happening with Stone Circle.
Thank you, Councillor Hubbard, and I will ask Cabinet members to respond after the debate to that point and any others that may be raised. Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'm in favour of this proposal, but I am nervous. I look at what has happened in Nottingham, very big unitary authority that spectacularly went bankrupt with Robin Hood Energy, a fantastic example of taking from the poor and giving to the rich, an absolute cock-up. And I'm very nervous that one of the issues that came out of the report looking at Robin Hood Energy was the lack of scrutiny and commercial expertise. So I have a question to the monitoring officer, if I may. In the case of Stone Circle accruing significant losses or deficits, one would assume that they will be underwritten by this council. And I'd like to know briefly, please, what the position of directors of Stone Circle and their liabilities might be, and indeed what the liabilities of elected members might be should Stone Circle go into receivership or accrue significant losses.
Thank you very much. I will ask the monitoring officer to respond to your specific question in a minute, but before that, I would like to hear Councillor Grant. I just want to check, is there anybody else wish to speak on this matter?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Councillor Gavin Grant from Malmesbury. I really want to perhaps attempt to reassure my colleagues on matters of scrutiny here, because I think this is a very important area. And I think, in fact, the resolution that's coming before us in a moment or two, Chair, actually does provide the correct structure, which allows the council, which is the shareholder body here, to be appropriately represented. It does, I think, to your point, Councillor Dean, create a structure whereby those who are running the company are directors, with no disrespect to the current directors, which include, of course, my glorious group leader and the leader of the council, that the directors should be appointed because of their competency in managing companies rather than their political positions within this council. That said, Councillor Hubbard then also raises a very important point. So it is one of the tasks now allocated to the Financial Planning Review Group to scrutinise the performance of Stone Circle here on behalf of the council. And of course that review group has representatives from all of the groups sat on the floor of this council chamber today, and I have the privilege of being its vice chair. And similarly, the governance arrangements, the appropriateness or otherwise, or the attempts to propose suggestions for amendments to the governance arrangements falls in fact to our audit and governance committee, chaired by the excellent Councillor Connolly. So I think there are appropriate structures now being set into place, and frankly, they are more robust than those that have been with us to date. And I think, therefore, this is a resolution which I will be wholeheartedly supporting, and I would urge colleagues to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Grant, thank you very much. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. I wanted to speak in response to Councillor Dean's, but Councillor Grant has virtually said it all for me. These changes strengthen the scrutiny and strengthen the control of Stone Circle, which was started off, and we started looking at this probably about 9-12 months ago in terms of how to make it better in terms of that. And I remind Councillor Dean as well that we set the strategy for the Stone Circle Group. We say what markets they can go into. We say how they work in those markets. And for example, Nottingham suffered because it went into the retail market for energy, and that's what caused it all the problems. We have made it absolutely clear that we do not intend to do that. The only market we would go into is where we're doing energy production, which is much less volatile and much more reassuring in terms of returning money for using Wiltshire land to produce solar panels and whatever in terms of doing that. So we are still setting all of the direction, all of the strategy, and we've increased and improved the scrutiny, and I will therefore support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Whitehead, thank you very much. I see nobody else indicating they wish to speak, so I will invite Councillor Church if she has any other comments before we move to the vote. Oh, sorry, I do apologise. I passed the monitoring officer to ask the specific questions that were raised by Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Dean, for your very helpful question. I think that Councillor Grant has assured you and provided you with some assurance around the structures that are in place. And I just wanted to invite you to have a look at the review that myself and the Deputy Chief Executive wrote that has led to the proposals, which drew very heavily on the experience at Nottingham, the public interest report that was issued with a series of very specific guidance for councils and other best practice that I think deals with the concerns that you initially raised. You asked some very specific questions about liability, and I think I'll deal with that through a briefing note, but I'll share that with all members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Now I pass to Councillor Church to ask if she has anything to say before we move to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I think a great many of you have covered some of this in terms of some of the questions that have been asked. The reason for this shareholder group and the reason we're changing the constitution today is to improve the scrutiny and the governance around Stone Circle. We don't want to fall foul in a way that other councils have. So it's vitally important that we have this scrutiny and this shareholder group that we've set up in place. Certainly, the meetings of the shareholder group can be attended by others. It's not going to be a closed group, so I think that's a positive thing. So those that are interested can obviously come along. The board itself currently has members, so elected members from various parties on the board. Part of the governance process suggested, and the recommendation which was approved, that we would no longer have elected members on the board. So concerns around it being just an executive style arrangement isn't true, because scrutiny itself will be providing that cross-party governance, which should give reassurance to everyone around decisions of that particular shareholder group and the direction of Stone Circle itself. Thank you.
Councillor Church, thank you very much indeed. Without further ado, then we will proceed to the vote. I would ask all those in favour of the motion to please say aye. Aye. Any against, no? I hear no no's. Any abstaining, please indicate. Thank you. We now move on to notices of members' motions. The first motion, this is item 10, starting on page 159 of your summons. First one is motion 10A. This motion from Councillor Paul Sample, JP. Councillor Sample, would you like to move your motion?
Chairman, thank you. Could I first just echo the comments, Chairman, which you made about David Amis at the beginning of the meeting. The events of last weekend have shocked many of us on these benches as well. There are members of this group who worked with him, particularly on issues around animal rights, and his death will be much lamented. And can I also say that those of us who've been in the county for some time will have noted with some sadness the passing of Dennis Walters, who was the Member of Parliament for Westbury from 1962 to 1994, who was a man of great intellect and was a war hero, having marched through Nazi lines as a young boy, as a young Italian boy, to get a message to the Allies. And he died in Lucca on the 1st of October. Those of us, again, who worked with him or met him as I did after a public meeting where he addressed us on European issues, again, will very much regret his passing.
Councillor Sample, thank you. Now, would you like to move your motion?
I will. Chair,
who
I'd like
who
to...
is your seconder, please?
There we are.
There we are. Thank you very much.
I'd like to move this motion, Chair. Since I put it on the agenda, I've had lots of emails from all sorts of people, all giving me their views about how the My Wilts app can be improved. And there is a general, I have to say, a general agreement that it's much better than what we used to have, which was nothing. So I had an opportunity to speak with the leader of the council, and I know he has a proposal to give in a moment. But I'd just like to say that I think a general review of the app to improve it would be much appreciated by those enthusiasts who are members of the council and our residents who use it. In days gone by, as I say, back in the 1990s, if we wanted to get something done, we'd go off down to the depot at Wiltshire, we'd meet the highways engineer, we'd go through our notebook, explain all the problems, and they would be sorted out probably sometime Friday next week. And it was wonderful, but I know it was time consuming. The My Wilts app is in many ways much, much better than that. But I have to say that there are people who've used it and are disappointed with the experience, where they have reported something via the app and then expected for something to happen, maybe a pothole, maybe cracked pavement, whatever, and then for whatever reason it hasn't been done. And often it hasn't been done because there are financial issues, or it's not on the programme, it's not part of the timetable, or frankly, sometimes it's just not the responsibility of this council, and it's someone else's problem, like the A36 national highways, etc. So I would like the chance really for us to go back and have a revisit, and I've made my own particular proposal for amendment, but I know that there are other people in the room who have probably better proposals as to how it could be improved. And if we do improve it, I believe more people will use it. I believe it would enable us to close the gap between those people who are happy with what's been done and those people who are not happy, but where we may be able to do some smart work, may be able to improve the service to them. I think it will enable us to explain to people the problems around financial and budget constraints, and I believe, in addition, it will result in the end in more happy customers and enhance Wiltshire Council's reputation. So I had a chat with Richard before the meeting. Most grateful to him for the very positive response which he gave to my suggestion, and I believe that you are likely to take it back and involve more members in seeing how it can be improved, and hopefully come back in a couple of months' time with a much improved product and something which will be of credit to Wiltshire Council and indeed all of the staff, members and residents, more confidence at the end of the day. So there we are, that's it, and thank you very much for hearing me, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Sample, thank you very much indeed. Now, I'm not sure, Councillor Church, do you wish to respond, or Councillor Kluwer?
No, that's fine. No, I'm happy. I was just wondering what conversation you had with the leader, so I didn't want to obviously do something against what the leader would obviously want to ensure was in place. But I absolutely want to thank Councillor Sample and Parman for this motion. I think it's not just about how to improve the My Wilts app, in my view. It's about how we improve customer service with Wiltshire Council and how we interact with our residents. And I do certainly feel that digitally we need to make improvements, and the My Wiltshire app is obviously one of the component parts of that. I think we need to look at the touch points, the digital touch points between our residents and this council, and we shall allow for better opportunity of feedback, which would actually translate to more meaningful data that this council can use, which then in turn can improve services. We want a mechanism by which we can reap that data, circle back to residents with a particular answer, and have all this done digitally, because of course it's a low cost benefit and it also is much more timely. But ultimately, that should improve services and improve outcomes for our residents. And I take on board everyone has a different experience of the My Wilts app, and I will take back to officers at looking at some further improvements to that. But I do also want to just say that this motion really is an operational matter that, in my view, best sits with the customer experience pillar of the org recovery group, which is looking at a more holistic way in which we look at customer service improvements and which My Wiltshire app will form part of. So that's the direction of travel we need to go. I don't think we should necessarily be looking at My Wiltshire app in isolation. I think that's what I'm trying to tell you, but of course we will move this forward as a priority.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Church. In my view, as you say, this motion is essentially operational. I would move that we refer this motion to the leader without debate. I would point out that under clause 18.2.2, if it is referred to the leader, he has to respond to the proposer in detail and advise the steps he will take. That is the path which will open up what I think, speaking personally, is a dialogue that needs to be had. Before I move the motion, I would say, yes, I also have had people who've complained about potholes, then you get the phone call a week later saying it's been fixed, and no, it hasn't, Stuart. So I move that we refer this motion to the leader without debate.
And I will second that, Chairman.
That is seconded by the Vice Chairman. I will now ask all those in favour of that motion, please say aye. Aye. All those against, no. Any abstentions? Thank you very much indeed. We now move on to... Sorry. Shame. Right, we now move on to notice of motion under item 10B, a motion from Councillor Brown-Matthew, which appears on page 161 of your summons, with a briefing note that appears on page 163. Councillor Matthew, would you please move your motion, and I would ask you to find a seconder.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have Councillor Grant seconding this motion.
Councillor Grant, you're in second. Thank you very much.
Yesterday, I was out with a member of the Cotswold Wardens, scouting a number of possible routes for a cycle path from Box into the city of Bath. On TV, we've been hearing from Prince William and David Attenborough of the award of the Earthshot Prizes for building a sustainable future. Many of us are trying to do our bit for nature and for halting the climate emergency. And in just 13 days' time, we have the start of the COP26 conference in Glasgow. We have a motion before us to support the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill. This bill was introduced into Parliament in 2020 as a private member's bill by Carolyn Lucas MP. And since then, it's received support from members of every party in Parliament. The totals to date are 29 peers, 118 MPs. The total number of councils now supporting the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill is now 127, including what might be considered a sister county to us, that of Devon, which is also Conservative run. The bill proposes a UK legal commitment to enact measures consistent with a maximum of 1.5 C global heating, halting and reversing the destruction of nature and therefore becoming nature positive, addressing the UK's entire carbon footprint and destruction of nature wherever in the world it occurs, bringing the nation together through a climate and nature assembly which will engage ordinary people with scientists and experts, make recommendations and keep Parliament sovereign at all times. The UK is not on track to meet its Paris Agreement commitments. According to the Climate Change Committee, whose chair I might remind you is John Gummer, now Lord Debon, policies in place so far will only cut, at most, a fifth of the emissions required to hit the 6th carbon budget in 2035. If progress does not extend outside the power sector, the 6th carbon budget will be missed by a huge margin. Though territorial emissions are now nearly 50% below 1990 levels, the journey to net zero thus is far from half done. Wiltshire Council's draft Green-Blue strategy shows our direction of travel. Our motion on the climate emergency passed in 2019 set us on the right course. All the CEE bill needs to become law is support. The support of this council, as indeed was made manifest by the counties of Devon and Oxfordshire, will help to give our members of Parliament the mandate needed to support it in Parliament. I ask that we pass this motion with a resounding majority so that we can offer leadership from the shires of Old England. Let's do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Matthew. I now have 3 members of the public who have registered to make a statement on this item, and they may speak for up to 3 minutes each. First name I have is Mr. Adrian Temple-Brown.
So it's good to know that we're going to fix the app whilst the world burns. Here's a riddle. How many councillors does it take to turn off the lights in a vast concrete car park in Chippenham? It's a joke, really, because nobody still knows. I would say good morning, but as far as the environment's concerned, there hasn't been a good morning since the agricultural revolution, when humanity first gained the time to convert nature into money. We stepped it up through the Industrial Revolution, when humanity gained the technology to convert nature into money with industrial efficiency. This fossil fuel era is when corporations and money men gained control of governments and workforces intent on converting all of nature into money. Science formally confirmed that the rape of Mother Nature and the pillage of the Earth's resources by mankind has consequences. The climate of our planet has changed. Vast sections of the ecology that is life on Earth lie destroyed. The Earth's climate and ecosystems are both now nearly broken beyond repair. But our politicians bay for more economic growth, more money. Democratic government was designed to control the population for the benefit of society through policy. But the policies of today's government are to control the population for the benefit of business, to make money. Every major UK government policy accelerates climate change. Every major UK government policy accelerates ecological destruction. Local government policies externalise all climate and ecological costs by law, allowing them to count for nothing in our society. The politician in charge of this local government formally stated that there is no policy to account for the climate or ecological costs of building estates, roads, and incinerators. This is ecocidal. Not only are climate and ecological costs externalised by core policy, Wiltshire Council's head politician confirms that his cabinet has no intention at all of internalising these costs through any new policy. So this is where we stand today. Our planet's weather system and our planet's ecosystem are both on the verge of breaking beyond repair. In the face of total destruction, our party politicians cower behind denial, prevarication, truth-bending, comedy, and rhetoric. Key politicians do not have the courage even to admit that the first, most cost-effective, most socially just act is to insulate Britain's housing and then do it. When government is finally educated, it will realise that the challenge to insulate Britain is trivial compared to the real task. In parallel with restoring all of nature, we must de-insulate the atmosphere of the entire planet. And for that task, society needs
Mr.
leaders,
Temple-Brown, could you
not
draw your remarks
politicians.
to a close, please?
Any questions?
No questions, thank you very much. I now call Mr. Mel Moden, please. Miss Mel Moden, I do apologise.
I'm here today representing Extinction Rebellion groups from around the county. What a pity that what we've heard so far from the Cabinet Minister pretending to care about carbon something or other has been blah, blah, blah. Even the Queen has had enough. The science is clear. We are in the 6th mass extinction event, and we will face catastrophe if we do not act swiftly and robustly. Our air is so toxic that the United Kingdom is breaking the law. It harms the unborn whilst causing tens of thousands to die. The breakdown of our climate has begun. Extinction Rebellion, in alignment with our consciences and our reasoning, declare ourselves in rebellion against our government and the corrupted, inept institutions that threaten our future. We refuse to bequeath the dying planet to future generations by failing to act now. We act in peace with a ferocious love of these lands in our hearts. We act on behalf of life. And in that spirit, Extinction Rebellion today make 3 demands of this council. We demand that Wiltshire Council scrap or reverse the plan to build a Westbury incinerator. We demand that Wiltshire Council immediately make carbon reduction the top priority in every council policy, plan and decision, and agree by June 2022 comprehensive carbon reduction actions with annual targets to deliver a carbon neutral county by 2030. And our 3rd demand is to inform these actions and targets. Wiltshire Council shall convene a citizens' assembly by March 2022 with a commitment that the council fully implement the Assembly's recommendations. To quote Sir David Attenborough on Sunday evening's Earthshot programme, we know where this story is heading, and we must give it a different ending. Extinction Rebellion will be holding Wiltshire Council to account.
Thank you very much. And finally, public, Mr. Andrew Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. I won't speak much about the bill. It's a respectable and well-researched bill. There's a one-page briefing linked from your papers. If you haven't read it, shame on you. I want to speak about its link to one of the climate motions passed in February 2019. And I'm referring to the motion put by Councillors Whitehead and late Councillor Jerry Wickham, Environment and Global Warming. This bill supports what this council has resolved to do under that motion. And there are a dozen things you've resolved to do, but I'll pick out 2. One is to enhance the current air quality strategy and request that any air pollution responsibilities that are passed on to Wiltshire Council are fully funded by central government. Another is, you've resolved to instigate a green campaign to support and stimulate the generation of sustainable ideas across Wiltshire. Now, if you pass this motion before you today, you are vouching for the work, the hard work of the climate officers, the green and blue infrastructure officers, been working hard for you to carry out those consultations. You'll be given the message that their work is worthwhile. Councillor Kluwer represents you in an alliance or network of rural councils predominantly, which are lobbying hard central government to make it easier for councils to act on these problems, these emergencies. The climate and ecology bill will make the work of all these rural councils much easier. I want to turn to your voting. I regret that the standing orders have been suspended for a practical reason. I look back at the motion passed without any votes against by this council in February 2019. There were no votes against, there were no recorded abstentions. However, there were 16 who didn't vote, but they were present. 11 of them are not in this council now. Perhaps that means that voting is good for you. But I want to ask everyone, every member who at the time of the vote is minded to abstain or vote against, would you please do us the favour of speaking if that's what you're minded to do? Please don't not vote If you're going to abstain, tell us, tell your fellow members and say why. If you're going to abstain or not, or vote against, tell us why. So I'll just mention the names of those who were present but did not vote on the councillors' motion, Councillors Whitehead and Wickham. Councillor Christopher Newbury, Councillor George Jeans, Councillor Horace Prickett, Chancellor Johnny Kidney. This time, please vote. And if you're going to abstain or vote against, please tell the meeting why, and anyone else, even though you're not required to by the
would you please draw your remarks to a close? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, I shall now, Councillor Nick Bosherell is relevant cabinet member, the opportunity to respond. Councillor Bosherell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will start off by talking about the motion which is before us. Edmund Burke, when addressing the electors of Bristol, articulated the notion that whilst you may choose a Member of Parliament, you don't do so in order to merely get that MP to act as an advocate on your behalf. So I would start by taking issue with any aspect of a council motion which mandates or calls for MPs to act as this council demands of them, which is what this motion, as I said, seeks to do. More pertinently, perhaps, I have to say that I have some issues with the Climate and Ecology Bill, which is referred to. And I take issue that this is some sort of all-party, wide-ranging matter. It's supported by 118 MPs, most of whom are Scottish National Party or backbench Labour, and 29 peers of various parties and none. Indeed, actually, one of the peers, I noticed I was best man at their wedding a long time before they were ennobled, I hasten to add. But that doesn't make me any more enthusiastic about supporting their bill. And why should that be? For three main reasons, I think. Well, thank you for... If I need a ventriloquist, I'll bring my own dummy, thank you. Firstly, the Lucas bill is at second reading stage in the Commons, i.e. that's the very initial stages, so it hasn't progressed far in the last months, and it almost certainly, given the failure to widen its supporter base across the House of Commons, will not be proceeding much further. Private members' bills can only proceed if they manage to garner sufficient support across the House and from the majority governing party. And this one, like many others before, has manifestly failed on that score. So even if we pass this motion today, it will be an act of demonstrating a point, proffering a signal, rather than aimed at any practical outcome. And that in itself may not rule it out. I agree that sometimes transmitting a signal is something that we have to do. But let's bear that in mind, that that is what it would do. Secondly, I happen to believe that councils work best and do their best and achieve most success when they concentrate on what they can actually do, as well as avoid being distracted by what they can't do. We already have a deadly serious climate change and ecology role to undertake. And quite simply, we need to concentrate on that and get on with it now. Urgency. Thirdly, and the most important reason, there are key aspects of this bill with which to take issue with. The other environment bill, which you may not be aware of, but there is another environment bill which is going through Parliament and is now at its final stages. It's about to become the law of the land. It is the largest piece of legislation this country will have seen since World War II. And it addresses many areas of existing significant environmental harm. It will have far-reaching impacts on the way we operate as a council. And forgive me if I only cover a few of these impacts and aspects, because as I've said, it is the largest piece of legislation in 70 years. Waste and recycling includes a plastic packaging tax, and container recycling, extending producer responsibilities across the board. The impact of how the council operates in those aspects will be very wide-ranging. We're going to have to change whole systems. Tackling poor air quality and all its sources, was mentioned before by one of the speakers. Knitting together toxic pollution and climate change, something which is missing currently at the moment. And improving nature, promoting biodiversity, net gain, conserving species and strengthening the council's duties in all these areas. So there is a raft of things that are coming our way and which we need to concentrate on and which will address many of the concerns which the people outside were demonstrating about just now. The Lucas Private Members Bill, by contrast, which we're being asked to support in this motion, even though it has no chance of success, seems to duplicate a lot of the Environment Bill. In fact, it even uses identical words in parts, which is good as far as it goes. However, there's a very big if. It introduces a new and, I believe, counterproductive element. It mandates the setting up of an expert body to establish a Climate 20 and Nature Assembly, a sort of citizens' assembly, consisting of a representative sample of the UK population. This putative assembly would carry enormous weight and power depending on the various levels of support for the measures which it could demonstrate. We already have a system whereby MPs collectively in Parliament exercise power and are not second-guessed and unduly constrained. This will probably make me less popular with some of my fellow councillors, but by the same logic, I also have problems with referenda. Unfortunately, that issue was sold many years back. But put bluntly, we already have a citizens' assembly. It's directly answerable to the people. It gets refreshed and re-elected every few years, rather more frequently of late, and it's called the House of Commons. If it's only for that reason alone, then I would not be able to support this bill. So I urge this council, don't get distracted and going down blind alleys which offer no succour and which impose new populist dimensions. As a council, we have a very serious job to do on the environment and climate change fronts. And we need to get on with that without further ado and do them now. And that's why I beg to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Botterill. I now move that we debate this motion.
I'll second that.
All those in favour of debating, please say aye. Aye. Any against, no? Right. We will now hear from group leaders. So first of all, Councillor Kluwer, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As has been pointed out, there is an environment bill going through the Commons at the moment that changes the entire emphasis of the way in which we look at farming, from paying people to pretty much do nothing to paying farmers to address issues of environmental concern. Contentious, difficult, but it's going through. It's on the verge of becoming law. It's a bill that's had a huge amount of discussion, huge amount of debate, and a huge amount of controversy around it. I suspect there are elements, speaking of my New Forest National Park Authority hat on, that will still need ironing out. There are still concerns being raised, but the detail that's gone through is huge, and as a result, it strikes me as a really serious, effective, beneficial piece of law that is coming to improve the environment of our country. The idea that we should then, as a council, tell MPs to instead, or even alongside, vote for a different bill that hasn't been put forward by the government, hasn't been scrutinised, hasn't been through any form of proper analysis, well, it strikes me as wrong. It strikes me as wrong that we should be telling our MPs how to vote about anything. We might want to talk to them, express our views to them privately, certainly something I do all the time, but to dictate to our MPs, no, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. I'm sure we all get the occasional member of the public who tells us how we ought to do things, or something that we ought to do, and very often we need to turn around and explain to them, I'm sorry, it's not that simple. And for single voices to say, you must do this, that doesn't sit well with me at all. As has been pointed out, we have a citizens' assembly here in Wiltshire. We're it. We're elected every 4 years. And I note that some of the speakers stood for election and weren't successful at being elected. And the idea that we should replace that on a Wiltshire level with an unelected citizens' assembly to tell us what to do, that's not democratic. We're democratically elected and accountable. In Parliament, we have exactly the same thing. We may not always like what our MPs do. When I was the first time I voted, I was living in Vauxhall. The MP there, I'm afraid, didn't particularly reflect my views, although I think she did reflect some of them, which was interesting, but most of them she didn't. But she was elected by the electors of Vauxhall, and she went and carried out that role in Parliament. And the idea, again, that we turn around because we don't like the results that an election have given and say, no, oh, you're not the right group, you're not the right Citizens' Assembly, we demand another Citizens' Assembly, that is not democracy. We are a democratic country. That's really important. And it's really important we remember that. As for the comments that this council has done nothing, Councillor Matthews, I was very pleased to hear reference to the fact that we've seen significant reductions in the national carbon emissions over the course of the last 2 decades. I agree, not enough. We need to go a lot further. But this council is doing everything within our control to reduce our carbon emissions and set a lead in Wiltshire. We have reduced the council's carbon emissions by 80% since 2015. If the country had done that, there would be dancing in the streets, I suspect, from some of the more vehement protesters and the people more vehemently involved in this, probably including me. It would have been a great step forward. But we've done it in Wiltshire, and we've got a plan to take it to zero by 2030. We know we can do that. We have taken our council housing stock, Mr. Temple Brown. We are insulating all of the houses within our control. We're doing it. So again, to say we're doing nothing, nonsense. We are doing everything we can. All our new council housing will be built to net zero. It'll be built, in essence, to passive house standards, though if you want to go for modular off-site construction, passive house gets really difficult to impose, so it isn't passive house, but it's the same equivalence. All of the council housing we build will be built to that standard. Everything we control will be done. And I am lobbying government, both through my role as chairman of the Countryside Climate Network, but also I went to the Conservative Party conference for the first time. I'm not a great fan of party conferences. And I attended every meeting I could and spoke to every minister and made the point on every occasion that we need to end the institutional insanity that has been endemic from parliaments with Labour, Conservative and Lib Dem members of the fact that we haven't made house building zero carbon. The fact that we're building houses today that will need retrofitting. And to give an example of the insanity of that, I was talking to someone at the conference, worked for an energy company, who looked to try and retrofit their property, built in 2017, and was quoted £19,000 because they need to replace micro-bore piping with proper bore piping to put an air source heat pump in. So we are doing that as an administration, and I hope you're all doing it as councillors. We're getting that point out there and across. But for us to, instead of ask and make the points and explain the logic, to turn around to Westminster and say, you must, I'm afraid we'd just lose the argument. We'd be seen as the strident people in the corner shouting, we demand, rather than the people who try and understand the problem and try and come up with the solutions and try and do what we can to deliver them. What is it, Pauline? 88 million we're investing. 88 million pounds we're investing in carbon reduction in Wiltshire. Almost all of it self-funding as well, because we're doing it carefully and properly. There is no way I will back this motion, and there is no way I will back anything that calls for a citizens' assembly. We're it. It's our job. We can't abrogate that to someone else. I'm clearly feeling a little bit wound up over this. I'll take a deep breath and calm down and leave it to others to continue the discussion.
Councillor Clure, thank you very much. Councillor King, follow that.
I don't intend to follow it, really. You know, because I would like to think that everybody in this room would use their own minds and vote in their own way, using their own consciousness. It's not for me to tell anybody what to do, or I don't think it's up to anybody else to do the same. But I hope that every councillor in this room would think independently and express themselves independently, because this is a big task that we're being asked to consider today. You know, the BBC and their Channel 9, BBC4, have been doing a marvellous production of art and history. And in one of those places, they told the story about the people who went out in the 18th and 19th century to the Far East and other things to paint the place, to paint what was there, to make drawings of unique examples of flora and fauna, which astounded the world which they brought them back to. Though some of those things are in the British Library and in the great galleries of this country. And they created an enormous importance to the sense of space and the sense of place and the importance of that landscape and the importance of that place. And then they're very much embodied within us the ideals that we have in ourselves, in our planning system, that the sense of space is very important, and sometimes the sense of place even more important than that. This is a bill which quite simply tries to put together and marry climate change with ecology and the importance of protecting that fauna and flora going forward, which would not necessarily happen by just thinking about climate change in isolation. Indeed, it introduces a very radical thought. And that radical thought is that the two of those things should be integrated together in exactly the same way that we have the passion to integrate health and social care in this country. Because action in one actually needs action in the other, and those two parts of the thing need to act together to get the greatest amount of effect. If we just carry on thinking that we're dealing with climate change, that everything else will follow in good order, or in an environment bill which is absolutely empty on ecology issues, that we will create and we will protect that ecology going forward, then we are deluding ourselves. We're deluding ourselves from beginning to end. I have a measure of sympathy with your view that it's not for us to tell anybody what to do. It offends my sense of liberalism in a way. So I would hope that everybody in this room would write to their MPs in their own way and tell them the importance of that sense of space, that landscape, that ecology, and the importance of it, and what we should do to preserve it, and that the proper integration of the protection of that space, that place, that landscape, that fauna, that flora, with climate change is the absolute right thing to do. Whether it's perfect or imperfect in itself in that bill, or imperfect in any other way, making a start is more important than sitting back and saying, well, I think we covered it anyway, because we jolly well haven't.
Councillor King, thank you very much. Councillor Clark. Thank you very much, Councillor Clark. Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I start by saying there's nothing wrong with having a different opinion. It's quite healthy, I think, to have a different opinion and for us to debate those different opinions. I have been lobbied by a few young people on this particular motion, which surprised me, for a group of young people to actually pick up Wiltshire Council's agenda and look at them and see what's on there. So this is a topic of today, isn't it? Climate change is the topic which is shaping and moving things. And I do hear, you know, it does feel a little bit like posturing. It does. We haven't got a whip. The other two members can vote however their conscience feels. But I do think there are times when it's in, you know, I've heard a bit about demonstrating a point. I think there are times when I wish this council and this chamber would demonstrate a point. I wish we'd have demonstrated a point when our MPs voted against withdrawing the free school meals voucher and holidays last year. I wish we'd have demonstrated a point at the removal of the £20 universal credit uplift a few weeks ago. So there are times when I think it's right that we should demonstrate a point, and I think this is one of them. And for me, I'm going to support this motion.
Councillor Rogers, I will now open this item to general debate. Any members wishing to speak on this item, please indicate using by indicating raising their hands in the old-fashioned way. I already have Councillor Dean, so I'll call Councillor Dean first. Otherwise, please indicate. Councillor Grant. At the back.
Chairman, I'm passionate about climate change and the environment. All my life in public life, with the very minor fringes that I've occupied, I've always tried to do the right thing by the environment and the right thing around carbon reduction, as I see it.
Sorry?
But I cannot support this motion. I'd like to say something about Extinction Rebellion, first of all. Personally, my view is it is totally irresponsible for grown adults and often their children, their siblings, to be put under pressure to block this country's infrastructure, our roads and our bridges. People have died as a result of Extinction Rebellion. And I'm afraid stopping ambulances and stopping other emergency services vehicles getting to their destinations, damaging the economy, is no way to tackle climate change. And
would the members of the public please keep quiet and leave the room?
And
I'm going to suspend.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, it's interesting, isn't it, that when we ask to debate these matters, we listen with respect, we listen in silence to their views. When some of Extinction Rebellion tell us how to vote, tell us what to do, and when we put a contrary point of view, we are shouted down. Now,
members of the public, I'm talking to you, sir, with the mask on. I'm warning you, if you continue interrupting proceedings, I will ask you to be removed. And the same goes for the lady with the red mask. We are having a debate here. We listened to you courteously earlier. You can do my members the same courtesy. I'm uninterested in your views. Please sit down. Sit down. This is not a debate. This is not your chamber. You are not invited. Please leave. I'm suspending the meeting. Leave. I'm asking that you both leave.
Chairman, I'm grateful for your words of support, and I'll leave my comments there. People in the court of public and opinion can decide whether I'm right or not. Chairman, I've
suspended the meeting at the moment, Councillor Dean. I would ask you to continue in a moment. I will commence the meeting again in 5 minutes.
comes on, I'll just move it on now.
Councillors, would you please take your seats? Order. I've got a mace, yeah. I'm grateful to the members of the public concerned because I understand they have indicated that they are prepared to continue to attend but will not interrupt or argue with the speakers. I'm grateful to them for that consideration. If we would all take our seats, please, I will ask Councillor Dean to, I think, actually quite quickly draw his remarks to a close, having looked at the timing.
Well, Chairman, I'd actually like to make
Councillor Dean, if you could please continue. Thank you, without a debate.
Thank you. Chairman, I would just say to anyone, without raising the temperature any further, that if they doubt the credibility and the accuracy of my comments, to look at the Times on the 4th of October, which I think rather, that independent report on the front page of the Times rather outlines my views on Extinction Rebellion and the unintended consequences of those protests. Now, Chairman, I'm also very cynical for some of the reasons that the leader has said about the role of citizens' assemblies. I do feel that very often those bodies are self-selecting and democratically unaccountable. And I think it is absolutely right that politicians, minor elected politicians to me, through to the cabinet of this council, through to members of parliament, should be democratically accountable for what they do. And it is quite right that people are lobbied. For what it's worth, I think it's quite right that this council expresses its views on public policy where appropriate, but I could never support the creation of citizens' assemblies. I just don't fit in with the model of government in a mature liberal democracy that I personally support. Now, moving to the substantive points, in my ward, in Westbury West, there is widespread dissatisfaction with the democratic process and with the actions of this council over the environment. And that is a great shame because, as the leader of this council has said, this council is actually doing a lot. But the actions of this council as a planning authority, when it run roughshod over the views of those people that were opposed to an incinerator, and remember, the reason that that land was allocated was because for waste management purposes, because the same people, the same residents in Westbury were promised a recycling centre all those years before and a civic amenity centre, a tip. They never were told they were going to have an incinerator. They were told something completely different. That undermines faith in the democratic process. And 2,000 people in Westbury, 1 in 10 in the population in Westbury, took the time to write to this council to object to those views. And unfortunately, you know, those views were disregarded on that occasion. And so somehow we have got to be more responsive to public opinion. Otherwise, we will face increasing demands for things like we've heard today from outside residents. The Air Quality Action Plan in Westbury is quite old now and is being refreshed. That action plan, it was written into the plan that the results of it and that it would be tested annually by being taken to the area boards. There's never been a resolution to this council that I can find to say that that should stop. But when it became clear that the action plan in Westbury started work, that this wasn't working at all, and that air quality was getting worse, bucking the national trend, they just stopped bringing the action plan to the council, and that's terrible. Now, that action plan's being refreshed, but surely there's a learning there. In future, when things are going badly, as well as when things are going well, we need to fess up and debate them in public. And again, air quality is absolutely at the top of my agenda. There are real problems there, and the closure of Claverton Bridge, the effect it's having on communities in Warminster, in Trowbridge, in Bradford-on-Avon, and in Westbury is absolutely terrible. And we can't just turn around and lament these things at Cabinet. We need to work with other authorities, other councils, to try and work for our differences and make sure all these things happen. So I really appreciate time is pressing, Chairman. I can't support the bill. I think it's badly worded. I note really, I mean, the Greens talk about environment, that their reputation in Brighton, which is the one council they've ever run, is absolutely risible. Awful, the natural environment of Brighton as a result of Greens.
Dean, you are approaching your time now.
So, you know, my view is that they're not good at this. I don't support the motion. I certainly support the objectives.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Moving on, Councillor Grant, I think, indicated.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It was Councillor Sample who outed me as the friend and colleague of Sir David Amess. And in fact, our friendship goes back to the 1980s, Chairman, when he was the thrusting young Conservative candidate who successfully took Basildon, and I was clearly the not so thrusting young candidate who failed to take Southend West. And so David and I have that constituency in common. And our working together came from David's very deep faith. He, like people of faith around the planet, of all faiths in fact, recognised God's creation and that humanity had been given dominion over that creation. Well, it may have been a grand plan, but it may well have been that that part of it wasn't such a great idea, Chairman. The facts, frankly, speak for themselves. According to the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, hardly a radical organisation, 41% of UK species are declining, and 1 in 10 of the species of our country is now threatened with extinction. The RSPB and the government do part company on the next statistic, but not so far as you would expect, Chairman. The RSPB say that the United Kingdom fell 17 out of the 20 United Nations biodiversity targets agreed just 10 years ago. The government disputes that figure. The government said we only fell on 14 of the 20 targets. Not a great badge of honour for any of the political parties that have been in power, including my own, in that time. Funding for UK wildlife and environmental activity has declined by 30% in the same period. Now, we've heard also from another organisation that's not known for its radicalism, which is the Natural History Museum. In their report, Long Staging, who now recognise that the United Kingdom is one of the most depleted countries in Europe as far as biodiversity is concerned. And indeed, as the creators of the Industrial Revolution, since that time, we have lost half of our biodiversity in this country. The words of Her Majesty the Queen have been much reported, and of course it was her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, who was a prime sponsor of WWF, then the World Wildlife Fund, now the Worldwide Fund for Nature. In their report, Living Planet, which covers the period from 1970 to 2016, they note that across the world, 68% of our wildlife is in decline. Colleagues, these are staggering figures, and their impact is upon us already, as we know. But let's be clear about it. Candidly, colleagues, the generation of Sir David Amess and myself, and perhaps quite a few of us in this room, are not going to bear the burdens of this decline. It is our children and our grandchildren who will. Now, the provisions of this particular bill are not in tension with the government's Environment Bill. Indeed, as Councillor Bottrell has rightly pointed out, many of the clauses are precisely the same. And those who are arguing against this particular private member's bill have focused their attention particularly on the issue of people's assemblies, citizens' juries, whatever you wish to call them, and said that really perhaps they have no place in the British democratic tradition. Well, can I just counsel you gently on holding that view too firmly? In 2019, the United Kingdom established the Climate Assembly. It did so on exactly the same principles as enshrined in this private member's bill to guide going forward as far as people's assemblies are concerned.
So were these wild-eyed, unrepresentative individuals? Well, hardly. They were chosen and funded by the body that established that group. And you might be trying to work out which particular radical green organisation did set up that climate assembly in 2019. Well, I'm going to out them for you. It was the United Kingdom Parliament that set up the Climate Assembly of 2019, funded by public money and supported by parties across the House of Commons. Of course, in 2019, as colleagues in the central part of this chamber will know, the United Kingdom Parliament was controlled by a majority Conservative government. So there is no great radicalism about people's assemblies. They've been used by democracies across the world, in Canada, in the Netherlands, in France, in Ireland, in Poland, to tackle and bring people together on major issues of public concern. As such, it is entirely right and proper that that provision sits within this bill. We achieved a great degree of unanimity in this council chamber, and I give compliment to you, Richard, in the role that you played in recognising the climate emergency as Wiltshire Council, and in the role you're now playing on behalf of this council and with other local authorities. Your commitment to this cause, I have no doubt about its absolute sincerity. But I would gently say, and perhaps it's not cause and effect, but after Wiltshire recognised the climate emergency, one of the bodies that followed suit not so long after that was indeed the United Kingdom Parliament. I don't want to suggest you have such superhuman powers, Councillor Kluwer. But I would say that statements and gestures actually do matter in politics. The gesture of the leader of Her Majesty's standing beside our Prime Minister with the Speaker of the House of Commons outside the Belfairs Methodist Hall, a place I know very well, mattered. It mattered. So gestures do count, and I would urge colleagues to vote in favour of this particular gesture today. Thank you.
Councillor Grant, thank you very much. Councillor Jacob, I believe, indicated to speak. No? Got that one wrong. Councillor Newbury.
Oh, sorry. Jake.
Ah,
Hello.
sorry.
Sorry, I'm
Apologise.
Councillor Jacob. Is that okay? I can't promise to speak as elegantly and eloquently as Gavin, but I'm a really new councillor and I don't have the history or knowledge that the rest of you have who've been here for many years. But I have to say, when I read this motion, what I took from it was climate change and ecology. And what do we need to do about those? I didn't look at it and think, oh my goodness, this causes a crisis for the way that we operate democracy. This causes a crisis for the way that various bodies are set up. I focused on what I thought was the main important thing about looking at climate and ecology. And I totally agree with Gavin that it is a point to, it's important to just say, this is really important. Why can't we as Wiltshire Council say, this is what we think is really important, which is what you've all been saying. And by agreeing with this motion, surely we're saying, we're making a point, we're taking a stand. The sort of operational, logistical part of how we set up various bodies shouldn't be the key around this motion. And I don't think that is the important bit. When I've looked at the website for the Climate and Ecology Bill, I haven't looked at it and thought this is about organising various bodies. I thought this is about saving the wildlife and the ecology that we all really value, particularly in Wiltshire. I know my residents in my ward are really motivated by looking after wildlife. That's something that young people care about, the future cares about. And as Gavin says, we're not going to be here when none of that wildlife exists because we've made the wrong decisions and been too timid to take a stand when we stand here in 2021. Sorry, I feel a little bit emotional about it. And the point about not engaging with not having bodies made up of voters, of people. Surely we've got a crisis in politics. Nobody engages in politics. People don't vote. We want people to get engaged. We want people to sit on bodies and express their views. Surely that's the worst possible reason for not having an assembly of people expressing their views and saying they care about climate change. So I just would urge people, I don't think climate change should be about party politics. It doesn't matter which party we come from, whether we're in Extinction Rebellion or Wiltshire Climate Alliance or any other body. This is a chance to all come together, to say we're all working for one thing, which I know you're saying, Richard, 2030, you feel confident. 8 years to me feels like, oh my God, we get a move on. Because if we don't take action now and we're not brave, surely we won't achieve it. Thank you.
Councillor Newbury, please. Yeah, it's coming, it's behind you, so to speak.
Is that working? Well, Chairman, I wasn't going to say anything today, but I was challenged by a speaker in the open forum, and I'm sorry I didn't note down his name, but he mentioned my name and asked me to say something if I was going to abstain on this or vote against it, and to explain why. So I will say a few words. When I saw in the agenda that this motion was coming up, I did a little bit of due diligence. I clicked on the link in the electronic agenda to read the House of Commons briefing paper, which is linked there. I also read the text of the bill as drafted, as before Parliament. I did a little bit more reading up of the background to it, and everything that I read started to ring alarm bells. I don't for a moment doubt the sincerity, the sort of passionate sincerity of people who believe that we should be doing everything we can to fight against climate change, but this bill did not impress me in the way it approached its task. It seeks to establish statutory duties on the Prime Minister and the Cabinet member responsible for climate change, and to create something called a climate and ecological emergency strategy to be developed by the Secretary of State in cooperation with a Citizens' Assembly, which is said to be a representative Citizens' Assembly, and there are some provisions there for experts to appoint such a representative assembly. I hear what Councillor Grant says about the good work, the respectability in other countries of citizens' assemblies, but I think the difficulty with a specific one with a specific focus on a specific policy area is that it doesn't have, it's inevitably not going to have the ability to be representative, to be answerable, to be something that could be removed by the electorate at the next election if it fails to please. And it's not, I think, going to contain all points of view. It seems highly unlikely that the people who put themselves forward for a citizens' assembly on the climate and ecological emergency strategy are going to be people with any doubts at all about the direction they want to go in. So I wasn't impressed by the mechanisms in the bill. I also noticed that there were some provisions about giving the need to get consent from the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Parliament and the Northern Ireland Assembly, but not, curiously, from the London Assembly. And I wondered about how those had come to be there. There were a number of other things. I'm not going to bore everybody with a sort of blow-by-blow analysis. It's actually rather a commendably short bill, but I'm not going to bore anybody by going through it line by line. But essentially, there were some things in it that I might have been able to support, subject to seeing the detail, which is not available at the moment. And there were other things in it that I wasn't able to support. And in particular, I share the views of Councillor Botterill and Councillor Kluwer, our leader, on the Citizens' Assembly thing. And I did think, I try not to be too personal about people in the open forum, but I did think that somebody today lost it when suggesting that we needed a Citizens' Assembly in Wiltshire to carry out similar functions for this county. I mean, as others have said, people who need to be answerable for the statutory functions they have, and I don't think this bill goes the right way about it, Chairman. So that is for the benefit of the challenge, the gauntlet that was thrown down to me to explain why I would not be supporting it if that was the case.
Councillor, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Newman. Councillor Vigor, I think I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Don't want to detain people too long, so let me just try and make this point briefly. It might seem outlandish for this council to be supporting this particular bill, when you look at it from where we sit right here, right now. But I think if you take many steps back and look at this in a global context, bearing in mind what's happening next month, then it may look a little different. And actually, it may look a little different given the dynamics of what's been going on in this hall. Basically, what we have in the area of climate change is it is a chance, as I see it, to show leadership and to show courage in this council and nationally. There are climate victims in this world, countries like Bangladesh and countries in equatorial Africa, which are already suffering death and destruction from floods, heat waves, droughts, etc., because of climate change. There are climate leaders, and I would argue that the UK and the EU are among the climate leaders who have taken the lead in reducing emissions. And then there are the climate deciders, the countries like China, Russia, India, the ones who are actually going to make the difference because they are the biggest emitters, and currently they are not going as far as the leaders. The future sustainability of the planet depends on the leaders bringing the deciders on board with stronger ambition and greater action. And by the way, having worked myself in industry, media, NGOs, and in government, we're not going to overcome climate change unless we work together and we focus on things that unite us and not the things that divide us. I think that COP26 is a moment for countries to come together around what unites us. The bill, to be brave, the bill, in my view, is not extreme. The Climate Assembly that's been talked about so much, ultimately, the Climate Assembly can be vetoed by the Climate Change Committee, which is full of very sensible people, so it's not going to be an extreme thing. It talks about measurable improvements in nature by 2030. I think we would all like to, in 2030, look, and if we're still around, look at nature and think that we've been part of a measurable improvement. For me, this is a charter for greater ambition. And what does greater ambition look like in Wiltshire? Well, in the pluralist society that we enjoy, I think what greater ambition looks like, the things that the council is striving to do through its climate strategy, and the extra things it's being pushed to do by those councillors who want that strategy to go further. And it also includes the passion and the commitment of the climate protesters we've seen here. That's what pluralism is about. That's what this country is about. And so we're not asking councillors to go away and lie on the floor or lie down on the M4. We're just asking you to put your hand up. And if global Britain means anything right now, I think that what it means most is being a leader among leaders. And that applies within the nation as well, where Wiltshire can become a leader among leaders. So this is a chance for Wiltshire to stand out. It's a chance for Wiltshire to be brave, and I do urge you to take it.
Thank you very much indeed. And I'll call Councillor Whitehead, please.
Thank you. I've got one quick question that I would like Councillor Brown-Matthews to come back to me on. My understanding is that the bill isn't finished yet and that it's still being amended. With that in mind, asking us to vote for something that's not written seems somewhat illogical. But in the same spirit, I've got a plain piece of paper here. If Dr. Brown-Matthew would like to sign the bottom of it, I'll add the details later on. And I'm sure it won't cost him a lot of money in terms of doing that. I think that the problem I have is the problem that's been mentioned elsewhere. We've got a citizens' assembly, it's here today. And it's voted on by our citizens every 4 years. It's the envy of the world, our democratic system. So we don't need another one. And if I go through the detail of it, and this is what really concerns me, and it concerns me for many reasons, and some of them are very left-wing reasons, which might upset people on the table up there. So the bill says that within 2 months, we're going to go out to tender for an expert independent body who will then build this assembly. Now, we all know that the big five consulting companies will be those independent bodies. And they'll do this at a profit. Okay? They've then got to do this within 2 months. And then within 3 months, they've got to have the assembly working. You can't do an election. You can't do a selection of normal people in 3 months. All you can get is your cronies and your friends on board in 3 months. It doesn't say if it's paid or not paid or whatever. But it means that people working in the factory, people, HGV drivers who are in great demand driving trucks, will not be on that assembly. It will be handpicked by the big 5 consultancies. We don't know how many people will be on that. We don't know how few. We don't know what from backgrounds. We don't know what the tests are. This is cronyism at its worst. We went away from this. We went on to democratically elected people to represent people. And if they did not represent them, the people could make the decision and get rid of them. It doesn't say how we get rid of people in here. And this is the bill. Even when you come to the end of that, if 33% of the people on that assembly disagree with the actions of that assembly, the government have still got to follow it. And that really concerns me as well. Because as long as you make sure that less than 30% are opposing you, you will make the government obey every single thing you do. So my concerns about the bill, and thank you for the member of the public who reminded everybody that Jerry and I brought a climate bill in 2019, because nobody else ever mentions that. This council has been the leader of leaders in terms of the work on climate change. It's reduced its own consumption enormously, and it's done so sensibly. So we don't need to be leaders of leaders. What we need to do is democratically elected councillors who can put forward views through to the Parliament and to MPs for the people of Wiltshire. We do not need more assemblies being created, because it just gives a place for the cronies to go. And from my background, I've seen that all my life. Thank you.
Councillor Whitehead, thank you. I think I saw Councillor McLennan indicate. Yeah? Please make it swiftly.
It was just said that this Climate Assembly would be able to dictate government policy. In fact, it says that where a recommendation is approved by at least 80%, the Climate Change Committee must agree to propose the inclusion of that recommendation unless, in their opinion, there are exceptional and compelling reasons which must be stated not to. So the Climate Change Committee has a veto.
Thank you. Moving on, Councillor McLennan.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I share some of the doubts about citizens' panels and memberships and stuff. We have seen these things along the way. However, I'm warmed by the fact that when I was a Salisbury District Council member on an environment committee, we had Agenda 21 members. They didn't get a vote, but they were hugely helpful in keeping up with what was going on, what was around the corner, and educating us to make better decisions. So in terms of democracy, I think there are places for groups like that. Today we've had a very peaceful demonstration. There are people within that group, probably most if not all of them, that could be part of citizens' panels and around the country and help develop policy on this. They care more than us, and the best will in the world. We are elected, but we're elected across many facets of local government. And with the best will in the world, you cannot get to be an expert on anything at all. You only give it your best shot based on the information you've got. And if a citizens panel or group, whatever they call it, can come up with better information in a concise manner and impart that to us along the way, then democracy will be all the better for such things, not worse. But I do uphold the right to be elected every 4 years or not is a good thing for the final representation. Now, I remember also, I mean, there's lots of speakers here say, well, I can't support this, can't support that. And I remember the leadership of the Cabinet and at the time of Wiltshire Council when we debated the climate 2030 zero and all the rest of it. And every one of them to a person spoke against that motion that was put on the table by the general members of this council, and by sheer dedication and overriding the leadership, there were enough members of the Conservative Party group that actually voted with the rest of the opposition, as it was called, but it wasn't opposition. We're all in this same boat together. We all die by the same bad decisions, or we all live by them in this particular case. And by chance, the majority was in favour of the motion that we go zero carbon by 2030. And we all cheered at the end of it all. And to commend this cabinet now and this council, we've taken a great leap forward, and no people defend it better than the cabinet here, and in the leadership of Richard Kluwer, who I think spoke against it at the time, but has taken it on board, understands now where it's going, and leads us all in a very good way. And I thank him for that. Not least on the council housing and the zero. You know, it's all in here. So I just ask members not to go partisan and whatever, but just think about, is another bill on climate and ecology that's trying to help things forward going to make life a bit better or a bit worse? And if it can make it a bit better, as Councillor Whitehead said, it's not buttoned down yet. But in my heart and my head, someone like Caroline Lucas that puts forward a private member's bill, she's a member of the Green Party. Now, with the best will in the world, I haven't come across anybody in the Green Party that have got, you know, extreme views in any way other than trying to save us all. So I'm going to support on the basis of trust in a way, because it's not completed, but knowingly that any bill that's trying to improve climate and ecology at this time is going to be helpful along the way. And I think we should all sign up to that message. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McLennan. I call Councillor Blair.
On that day voted for that motion, and I think you are incorrect.
Thank you. We're not having debate on that. Right. Councillor Blair Pilling.
Thank you, Chairman. When I became a councillor, I did it because I wanted to be operating within the competence of Wiltshire and improving things for Wiltshire. My regret for the last best part of an hour, I think, is I don't think we've furthered the business of Wiltshire at all in this. We've been conducting somebody else's debate in this. I respect very much everybody's opinion about climate change, and I think a good deal of, and I would crudely call it virtue signalling, has gone on all sides in the last hour in this, and I think we all have it at our heart. We all want to improve our climate, we want to improve our air, we want to reduce carbon, etc., etc. But I don't think we've furthered that within Wiltshire one iota in the last hour. We did hear from our leader all the things that we have been doing, which is within our competence, and we are striving as hard as we can. I really wish the last hour had been spent talking about what Wiltshire is doing about other than what somebody else is doing. I would add to that I respect very much Councillor Newbury's due diligence. He always does. And he's gone into what the bill is and what the detail is, and he's looked around it. Well, I haven't. And I suspect the majority of us here haven't. And therefore, we are not actually competent to be debating what we're telling somebody else to do in their debate. Also, there is a process when we debate anything. A motion is put, it gets amended if necessary. We then eventually vote on the end result. We're being asked to tell somebody how to vote on something that hasn't yet been fully developed, hasn't come to its voting point. So I would not want to be in any way trying to tell somebody else how to vote in their place of government in that. So I would suggest that we more usefully spend our time focusing on council business in this, further the climate cause, further our air, further the planet for our children, but let's focus on what is within our bailiwick and our competence.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bear-Pilling. I just want to hang on. I just want to do a bit of housekeeping here. Currently, I have left to speak Councillor McGrath, Councillor Trigg, Councillor Sample, and Councillor Berry. Who have I missed? Councillor Hubbard. How could I miss Councillor Hubbard?
Councillor Trimble.
I thought it was
Trimble.
Trimble?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any more? Right, after I've called these councillors, I would propose, unless somebody has a burning desire to speak, to draw the debate to a close. So I've now called Councillor McGrath. Thank you.
Thank you. So 2 points from me, really. The first is probably a little bit parochial, but I'll mention it anyway. So both at unitary level and at parish level, we've got various different mechanisms for the public to engage with us, not least actually meeting with us councillors to discuss and to lobby us on various different issues, but even, you know, within different committees and working groups that we have at parish level, at unitary level, we've got, for example, I'm the chair of the Salisbury Air Quality Management Group, where members of the public can come to us and actually bring not only their concerns to us, but ideas on how to solve issues like air quality management. So we already engage, and there's obviously more we can do, but there is already a level of engagement, and there are opportunities for the public to come to us and to engage with us on those on the issues like air quality, but also in terms of the consultation we've recently had on the draft climate strategy. So I don't see how a citizens' assembly could really add anything to that. That, you know, that's not already covered by the various different mechanisms that we already have. So, in fact, I think it probably would dilute the process and actually make things a lot harder in terms of getting anything done. My second point is that, directly relating to the motion, you know, this is a private member's bill in the House of Commons. Are we as Wiltshire Council going to have an opinion on every single piece of legislation that goes through the House of Commons? Because I think that's probably the direct consequence of us supporting this motion today. You know, at the end of the day, you know, it sets a precedent whereby, you know, Wiltshire Council, or any council for that matter, would have, would have to have a certain view on every single piece of legislation going through Parliament. You know, absolutely, you know, I recognise we declared back in 2019 a climate emergency, and whatever your thoughts on that were and are, actually, that's the biggest statement Wiltshire Council could make on the issue of climate change. And as we've seen in the draft climate strategy and elsewhere in the work that I've described that our committees and groups are doing, you know, we are taking that seriously. So I really don't see what passing this motion today could actually do, other than basically, you know, show that we are only interested in talking as a council rather than acting. And, you know, as you know, I'm a new councillor, and I came into local government, local politics, to act rather than talk all the time. Obviously, there's room for talking, but without action, nothing is ever going to get done. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Trigg, please. She's heading to a microphone.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to be as eloquent or articulate, I'm sure, as some of our other speakers. And I know we all know this, but time is marching on and running out for us to address the climate emergency. And I know we all hope that we are part of an ambitious, dynamic, responsible council. That's what our residents want us to be. To make it clear at every opportunity that addressing climate change is the single most important challenge ahead of everybody in this room. Regardless of how you feel about it, It is the single most important challenge in front of all of us. So we wouldn't need to be talking about any other bill that might be going through government. This is the most important thing we could be talking about. And part of it is about public message. A part of it is saying, as a council, we look at things such as the climate bill and we think it is so important that we think we should be supporting that, to be saying that to our residents. I've certainly got residents knocking on my door, emailing, on the street, talking to me about environmental issues. On the whole, I would have to say they tend to be the younger residents, but they are talking a lot about environment messaging. They expect to see the council doing something, and sometimes that is about messaging. That is getting everybody on the bus to recognise how important that is. That is being brave enough to say, we all need to be on the bus, to keep saying it over and over again. We do need councils around the country, as councils such as Devon have, to send a message to MPs and to government that as a council, as an area, we consider it to be the most important thing that we are talking about. And part of that is, I appreciate, I'm a part of, this is a Conservative-led council. We have a Conservative-led government with a huge majority, but it has minority support in the country. Less than 44% of people voted for the Conservatives, and therefore may not realise that many of the people in this country do not support just their messaging, want their messaging, what they're talking about, what they're caring about, also heard. They don't want it forgotten in a big 80-seat majority. So my key thing, I totally support my colleague, Councillor Matthews' motion, because we do need to get everybody on that bus. And that means sometimes you just need to keep saying, we support this. The climate and ecological bill, I mean, part of me would say, what's the worst thing that it could happen? Is that it make things a bit better? That's the worst thing it could do, it make things a bit better? Why would you not support that? That's all we're asking for here, is that show that Wiltshire Council support that continued move, that this is the most important thing we could be talking about. And we want to make that message to our residents, to fellow councils around the country, and to our MPs and to our government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I now call Councillor Sample.
Thank you. Chairman, so I'm a farmer's son, and I was born in Wiltshire, and the first picture of me is sitting in a meadow at Hugditch near Froxfield, and then we moved to Shurston, and we were on a farm there at Pinckney Park, and then from there we went to Ramsbury, up on the top near the airfield, and my father's farm had fields at Burbage, and I spent a lot of my time in Collingbourne, Deuces, before I moved to Salisbury. And I was chairman of the Young Farmers. I was very pleased to be the chairman of the Pewsey Vale Young Farmers many years ago, and I recognise one or two names in the room today. So I'm a Wiltshireman, born and bred, and I've got chalk in my bones. Why do I love my county? Because when I was a child, I used to sit in the meadow, and I was surrounded by lapwings, peewits, thrushes, all sorts, everything you could imagine, every bird under the sun. So many that you couldn't count them. I had to get an observer's book of birds to recognise some of the ones I didn't recognise. Wonderful flora, wonderful fauna. Hundreds of insects, loads of different butterflies. Couldn't recognise the butterflies and moths. There were so many. And then the 1970s came along, and we had the disaster of factory farming came in, not on all of our farms, but we had huge amounts of agricultural finance made available by Barclays and Lloyds, who gave money out like it was water, so we could have bigger and bigger tractors, bigger and bigger machinery, every potential herbicide and poison to spread on the fields. And I, as a young man, sat on a tractor and spread it on our fields and got £4.50 an hour for doing it. And I went for a walk in the same area of Collingbourne this summer. And where there were once hundreds of varieties of birds and insects, there was just one breed of grass. There was hardly a bird to be seen anywhere. It has been the agricultural finance industry and the poisons and herbicides and insecticides that went with it have been a disaster for British farming, Wiltshire farming and world farming. And we have, as an industry, all but destroyed so much that was once so important. And people ask, well, what's it got to do with Wiltshire Council? At Christmas, I was given a book. It's called English Pastoral. It's written by a farmer. I read the first couple of paragraphs, and I thought, this man must have lived near me, but he didn't. He lives in Cumbria, and it was exactly the same story. I commend it to all of you before you vote today. I commend it to all of you to read it and find out what's happened in British farming and why it is that we've got to where we are. The issue of biodiversity is massively important, and it is only right that has been raised by a Member of Parliament, and we've got it on the agenda paper today. And I commend my colleague, Dr. Matthews, for doing so. It is the right of every member of this council to bring forward motions on which issues that they think are important. That is perfectly legitimate, because it is quite clear that some people in the room get this and some people don't. And you are the problem. You are the ones we need to convince. You are the people who need to hear from organisations brought together to consider issues like this. The biggest issue in Ireland, a hugely Catholic, traditional, conservative population who had been riven for decades on the issue of abortion, was resolved precisely by a citizens' jury coming together and hearing all the facts from experts, members of the public, indeed people who knew nothing. And they made a recommendation to government which was passed by the Eyre Parliament. And that is why the Conservative government has backed this type of citizens' democracy.
Councillor Sample, thank you so much.
Support the motion.
Councillor Hubbard. Shortly.
Thank you, Chair. You'll be relieved to know that I only have 3 short points I wish to make, and I'm not going to recollect any fields that I've been in. I can
believe that.
My first point, if I might, Chair, is that the former leader of this council, Councillor Jane Scott, spent a lot of time talking to us about the importance of not being in silos. And I think that's very relevant on this issue. Wiltshire, as a county, should not be a silo. We are part of a country, and we've got to contribute in towards that. And that means that it's important that we do make a point. It's important that we do say what we think and ask those above us in the political spectrum or in the political world to think about the things that this council says. In fact, I remember that when I was leader of the opposition, there were several occasions when, mandated by council, Jane and I sent joint letters to government lobbying them on issues that impacted Wiltshire. And all we are asking today, as I understand it in this motion, by saying that we support this motion or this not government bill, this private members bill in Parliament, is that we make a point that we are lobbying. We are not instructing anyone to do anything. And, you know, demonstrations are good things. And the argument, and I heard it, and Philip, you'll be pleased to know, I am going to mention your motion and Jerry's motion, because it is a great example of actually when there are two things, like there are two environment bills before Parliament, one close to conclusion, one still going through some of its formative stages. When there are two things basically asking for the same thing, you can have both of them. We had both of the bills about climate change a few years ago at Council. My second point, Chair, leads on from that, which is there's been much talk today about the fact that it wouldn't be possible, even if we were sympathetic to much of what is in this bill that is before Parliament, it wouldn't be possible for us to support it because we couldn't support all of it. And, you know, that might be a fair point, but I would just say that there are many members in this council who at times have looked at propositions that are coming forward and have backed them because they think that in the whole, it's the best thing for the county, even though there are elements of it they may not like. 2 years ago, I supported the administration's budget. I did not agree with every single element within that budget. There were some parts of it that I found quite awful. But in the whole, I felt it was the best move forward for Wiltshire, that is the budget that went forward. So I supported it. It would have been easy to say, no, I'm not going to support this because I find that one detail something I don't like. But the grown-up thing to do in politics is to say what is best for the people that we are elected to represent. And I would ask that, again, that is something that members here today consider. And I would challenge, I can say this wonderfully now as an independent, but I would challenge any member of any political party to say, do you actually agree 100% with every single policy that your party has? I suspect not. I certainly know that in my time in the Liberals, there were issues which I disagreed with. But the vast majority I was in agreement with, so that's what I went with. And my very last point, and I'm very grateful to my colleague Nick Murray for prompting this one in my mind, because it wasn't something I was initially going to say. Because I turned round to him and I said, you know what, Nick, you need to have a word. Because whilst I'm 100% in support of what the members of the public are advocating to us today, some of the tactics perhaps aren't helpful. And Nick made a point to me, and you're absolutely right, Nick. Change hurts. And what we are trying to do in this country, those who support the environmental movement, is effect change. 100 years ago, the suffragette movement was effecting change in this country, asking for equal rights for women. The behaviours that they did, the things that they did to get their message out, to get themselves heard, to get people to take them seriously, they ruffled feathers. They upset people. Those people were deemed as being crazy, mad, insane. Yet today we celebrate people like Emily Parkhurst because if she hadn't, I'm coming to a conclusion. Can you bring your peroration to a conclusion? We celebrate them because of the change they effected. Rosa Parks in the civil rights movement, when she sat on that bus seat, we now celebrate that at the time it was condemned. Let's listen to the actual message. Please support this today. It is important. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hubbard, thank you. Councillor Berry, over to you. Thank you.
You're sort of getting the heavyweight chat now.
Sorry, can I just make a quick note? I'm going to take one more speaker, and then I've got three and then I'm closing the debate, okay? So I'm taking Councillor Bucknell, I have Councillor Berry about to speak, I have Councillor Trimble to speak, and I have Councillor Rogers to speak, and Councillor Bucknell, and that will then close the debate. Thank you. Sorry,
Thank you, Chair.
Berry,
That's right.
over to you.
You just ruined my beginning. Anyway, listen, I stand here as a 62-year-old man. I've done more to ruin the environment than many in this room. I worked for a company that sold expanded polystyrene cups and built its market substantially. You don't see them anywhere on the street now because everybody decided not to use them and go for paper because they perceived it as being more environmentally friendly. We had a book which told us how environmentally friendly expanded polystyrene cups were. They used less energy, they used less oil, and all of the above in terms of washing up permanent cutlery. That's the sort of doctrine I was taught when I was a young salesman, plying my trade and flogging expanded polystyrene cups. Shame on me. But now, at the age of 62, I can look back and say that was wrong. In the same way, I can look back and say probably 200 years of the way the UK plied its trade was wrong too, because we are now where we are as a result of that, because we didn't think about it. The doctrine wasn't there. We were taught differently, just like me and my brainwashed expanded polystyrene cup chit-chat. So that's tough. But you guys, you all want to send a message. And you want to send a message, yeah, to UK government about this bill, supposedly. But you're not going to get that through. So let's do something that's much more sensible. Let's amend the motion and suggest that we reaffirm our declaration of a climate emergency and humbly ask the leaders of the world to come to a joint conclusion around how we best fix this. That'll send a proper message to COP, and I think that's the only message you're going to get out of this assembly, because ultimately we're not going to vote that through because we don't know what the bill says really, and actually the Conservatives and the government are putting through their own bill, which largely covers a lot of what the bill, the private members' bill we're talking about does. So please, be pragmatic, send a message, but let's, and I'm going to propose this amendment, let's amend the motion to say Wiltshire Council reaffirms its declaration of a climate emergency and calls humbly for COP26 and the leaders of the world to come to a suitable conclusion to help this planet. That's all I've got to say.
Congratulations, Councillor Grant. You beat me to it. That is a wrecking amendment, I'm afraid, Councillor Berry. Nice try. Nice try, but no cigar today. Thank you, Councillor Grant, for your timely intervention. Right, moving on. Councillor Trimble, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to pick up on a point that Councillor Grant made earlier on, and that is that scientists at the Natural History Museum at the weekend assessed the remaining biodiversity of the UK at about 53% of its original biodiversity quotient, if you like. The global average is about 75%, so we're well down on the global average. But the safe level is 90%. So once the planet has lost more than 10% of its biodiversity, you're in serious trouble. And what that means is we could be on the brink of a 6th major extinction event in the history of the planet. So, yeah, bear that in mind. That's just sets the background to this. Secondly, I think there's quite a serious misunderstanding of what a citizens' assembly actually is. And in particular, I'd like to take issue with what Councillor Whitehead said, and that is that you appoint one of the big 5 consultancies to appoint or recruit your assembly. That is absolutely not the point. There is actually an organisation that specialises in appointing citizens' assemblies, and they're called the Sortition Foundation, and they employ a process called random stratified sortition to do that. So what that means is you will end up with a citizens' assembly that looks very much like the population it represents. So you will have bin men, you will have nuclear physicists, you will have dinner ladies, and you will have professors of ancient history in that citizens' assembly. So I don't want to get hung up on that, but what I would recommend everybody do, if they're at all interested and they want to find out about this, go and have a look at a film called When Citizens Assemble. It's a very short film, it's about 15 minutes long, and it addresses the question of the Irish abortion citizens' assembly that took place 3 or 4 years ago, I think it was, in Ireland. And actually, it lent a huge seal of democratic approval to what the Irish government actually went and did in the end. It actually was like a kind of bomb on a hugely vexed question. So I'll just repeat that. When Citizens Assemble by Patrick Chalmers. It'll take you less than 15 minutes out of your life and you will understand much, much better what a citizens' assembly is all about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Moving on, Councillor Rogers, please. There we are. Tick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've heard a lot today about, this is about sending a message, sending a gesture. And I'm a great believer that, as Councillor McGrath said, that we send our best gesture, our best message, by the actions and the deeds that we do. And I think this council has got quite a good reputation for being one of the first to acknowledge that there is a climate emergency. And also it's been recognised by Friends of the Earth that we are one of the most climate-friendly local authority in the country. So I think there's no doubt in the fact that we, as a collective body, recognise that there's a climate emergency and are doing something about it. It's our deeds and our actions that are more important than our words. So I think that we should continue to do what we're doing with the strategies that we've got going through. We've got our climate strategy, we've got our EV strategy, all things that are pointing towards making this council and this county carbon neutral by 2030. And I think that should be our priority and not necessarily about sending a word and message. Continue to demonstrate what we need to do by our actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I believe Councillor Steve Bucknell had to speak, who's going to head to the dais.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Sample, when listening to your speech, I was reminded really of Laurie Lee's Cider with Rosie, but also of my own childhood days up in the Cotswolds. And for your information, peewits and lapwings are in fact the same bird. I can sell you a copy of the Observer Book of Birds. I agree with a lot of what you said, though. Things have changed in the countryside. A lot happened in the 1970s and since then. Personally, I think it's probably because of rules and support brought in for farmers from the European Union. So thank God we've got rid of that. We can now get back to some proper farming. And that's really why the Environment Bill that's going through and will get through Parliament is so very important, because that is putting right all of the wrongs that came out of Europe and the way that Europe did things, and will put right a lot of the way that farming has been poorly managed over the last few decades. So if this motion said, instead of the Climate and Ecology Bill, if it instead said the Environment Bill, I'd be wholeheartedly supporting it. And because that's the way that we are going to make the changes to our biodiversity in this country, and that's the best way to tackle the climate problem that we are facing. But there is one simple reason why this notice of motion does not say the Environment Bill, it instead says the Climate and Ecology Bill, and that is because, unfortunately, I think it was Councillor Jacob who said that the climate change battle is one which we all must fight, all political parties. It doesn't belong to any single political party. And you're right, it doesn't. So why, oh why, do the Lib Dems keep on using it as a political football? Why, oh why, do they put forward a political motion like this, using Climate and Ecology Bill rather than Environment Bill? And I think it was Councillor Trigg who said, come on, let's all get on the bus. And it's because the Lib Dems don't get on buses, they get on bandwagons. And that's what they're trying to create here. We in Wiltshire, we in the Conservative Party in Wiltshire, have just gone through a climate strategy consultation process, which finished just 2 days ago. We're busy going through the thousands of responses we've had to that, and we will come up with results that interpret that. And that's the way to properly tackle climate change, through an organised, systematic, well-developed sense of doing things properly. Now, to introduce something like a citizens' administration or a citizens' meeting that's being suggested by this bill that's not going through Parliament at the moment, that would just lead us down the situation where we have, on the one hand, elected representatives, Parliament, Council, and on the other hand, we have a body of people which we're not really sure how it's going to be selected, we're not really sure what its power is going to be, and that way lies chaos and anarchy. Now, I'm sure there are some in this room who would actually like chaos and anarchy. They thrive on it. That's what they want. And they're the ones that can't get elected, the unelectables. And that's why they want these citizens' assemblies, rather than doing things properly through councils and through Parliament. I am a great advocate of tackling climate change. And I will be leading whatever moves I can within my area board and within Royal Wootton Bassett in my division. This is the kind of thing which sets people's teeth on edge, and it is a disservice to the battle against climate change. Shame on the Lib Dems for bringing it forward. Shame on them for using climate change as a political football. I shall not be supporting it.
Councillor Bucknell, thank you. Now, finally, I'm calling Councillor Bridget Wayman.
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't want to say a huge amount, and partly because Councillor Steve Bucknell said an awful lot of what I was going to say anyway. But I did want to take issue with particularly Councillor Sample talking about farms, and I think he was denigrating the really good work that a lot of farmers are doing around the county and around the whole country at the moment, doing their bit to increase biodiversity. It's a huge amount of work that is going on, and I think it's absolutely shameful to say that we just seem to be sinking into this doom and gloom world and we're all going to die because there's no biodiversity. So I've always felt very positive about the way forward that we are pursuing. I live in the country, and the landowner next to me about 30 years ago planted a whole load of trees. I have planted a whole load of trees in my garden, and I am staggered by the increase in bird life that I have seen over those last 20 years. Obviously, I'm a very keen gardener, which maybe you don't know, but and I plant for pollinators and all sorts of other things. And my garden is just thick with bees and wasps and all sorts of insects. So I don't think we are heading towards some sort of ecological catastrophe. I think there are thousands and thousands of people in this country and in this county who are doing an awful lot of very good work to improve our biodiversity, and they should be applauded. Thank you.
Councillor Bucknell, thank you very much. Councillor Wayman, thank you very much indeed. I'm losing the plot, you can tell. Councillors, thank you very much. That concludes the debate. Councillor Botterill, as a cabinet member, do you have any final comments before? And please make them brief before we hear from Councillor Matthew in response.
I will be extremely brief. Look, we've had a forthright debate, and I think the choice is perhaps, if anything, a little bit clearer. On the one hand, we've got the words and the signals, the motion, and the other, the practical alternatives, which is to get on with the job in hand, build on the positives that we've achieved, some of which we've heard about, and to work on achieving the even greater progress that is necessary if we're to beat climate change. I have to say, we have an awful lot to do. The Environment Bill, which is close to becoming the law of the land, will give us an awful lot more to do. And we just need to get on now and do that. And so that's why I ask members to not support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Botterill, thank you very much. And finally, Councillor Matthew, as mover of the motion, do you have any final comments before we move to the vote?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to everyone that's been involved in this debate. I say when I hear the denialist comments, for goodness sake, look at your windscreen and see how many squashed insects you see on it these days. It's just so obvious the damage that has been done, sadly, to our environment. I want to thank Councillor Trigg for talking about the most important thing. I want to thank Councillor Sample for his moving renditions and reflections on what this country was and sadly what it has become, and this is a problem right across the globe. I also want to look a bit at the issue of the Environment Bill. There's been some talk of it. MPs on both sides of Parliament have said that the CEE bill is not needed because of the Environment Bill. And that is actually a very odd statement, given that the Environment Bill does not deal with climate change. It was designed as a post-Brexit catch-up bill on the environment and never intended to address the climate emergency. Professor Milner Gulland of Oxford University describes how the Environment Bill, despite its opening statement of purpose to address the biodiversity and climate emergency both domestically and globally, contains only domestic measures and fails to address the global dimension to UK destruction of nature. And this is another reason why the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill is so vital in addition to the Environment Bill. Thanks to Councillor Grant for raising the whole issues about the Climate Assembly. Again, in my speech, I talked about the Nature Assembly proposed will engage ordinary people with scientists and experts to make recommendations, but keep Parliament sovereign. If you want to back the Environment Bill, fine, but don't use that in support to cynically dismiss the importance of the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill. Be on the right side of history. Vote with your children and your grandchildren in mind and support this motion as it was originally written in full. Lastly, Chair, I would like to request a recorded vote on this motion, and I would like to ask for 10 supporters, perhaps, who might be prepared to support. Thank you, sir.
I now move to the vote. Are you sure you could hear me without it? I move to the vote. A recorded vote has been requested and will now be taken.
Okay, if I could request that members, when I call your name, if you state whether you're voting for the motion, against the motion, or abstaining from the motion. Liz Olstrom. Helen Belcher. Chuck Berry. Against. Thank you. Ian Blair-Pilling. Against. Nick Botterill. Against. David Bowler. For. Alison Bucknell. Steve Bucknell. Against. Claire Cape. For. Trevor Carbon. For. Daniel Cave. Against. Mary Champion. Against. Pauline Church. Ernie Clark. Against. Richard Kluwer. Against. Zoe Kluwer. Against. Mark Connolly. Against. Caroline Corbyn. Kevin Daly. Against. Brian Dalton. For. Jane Davies. Against. Andrew Davies. Matthew Dean. Monica Devendran. Nick Errington. Adrian Foster. Sarah Gibson. Gavin Grant. Ross Henning. Sven Hocking. Ruth Hopkinson. John Hubbard. Peter Hutton. Tony Jackson. Mel Jacob. Simon Jacobs. George Jeans. Johnny Kidney. No? Okay. Gordon King. Carol King. Edward Kirk. Jerry Conkler. Jackie Lay. Catherine McDermott. Brian Matthew. Mark McClellan. Charles McGrath. Ian McLennan. Dominic Munns. Nick Murray. Oops. Sorry. Nabil Najjar. Kelvin Nash. Christopher Newbury. Jack Oatley. Paul Oatway. Andrew Oliver. Bill Parks. Sam Pearce-Kearney. Anthony Pickenell. Horace Prickett. Nick Puntist. Tamara Ray. Ricky Rogers. Rich Rogers. Tom Rounds. Paul Sample. Mike Sankey. James Shepherd. Caroline Thomas. No? Okay. Elizabeth Treffel. Joe Trigg. Tim Trimble. Tony Trotman. Mark Verbenan. David Vigar. Ian Wallace. Derek Walters. Bridget Wayman. Stuart Wheeler. Philip Whitehead. Suzanne Wickham. Chris Williams. Graham Wright. Robert Yule. Okay, have I missed anybody out there? No? Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, that is 30 votes in favour, 50 against and 2 abstentions. Chair, the motion is lost.
Thirty votes in favour, 50 against with 2 abstentions. Thank you. So that motion is not carried. Right, moving on. Item 11, announcements from Cabinet and committees. Are there any, excuse me, Cabinet members or chairs of committees who would like to make any announcements? If you do, please raise your hand. We're losing the audience. Are there any questions in relation to the minutes of the Dorset and Wiltshire Fire Authority? Please raise your hand. Are there any general issues relating to area boards? Please raise your hand. No, moving right along. Item 12, membership of committees. Group leaders have changes to committee membership they wish Council to approve. Councillor Richard Cluer.
Yes, thank you. Officers should already have this, but Northern Planning to take Jackie Lay on as a full member and Ashley Neal to become a sub. Officer appointments, Ashley to go onto the committee and Simon Jacobs to come off. Staffing policy, Ashley to become a full member, Simon to become a sub. And corporate parenting, again, Ashley to come off and Simon Jacobs to go on. Sorry, and Health and Wellbeing Board, Ashley will now be attending his cabinet role.
Thank you. Right, over to Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 changes, and again, officers already have these. First of all, environmental select, Councillor Paul Sample off, Councillor Derek Waters on. And secondly, Southern Area Planning Committee, Councillor Bob Jones off, Councillor Trevor Carbin on, but Councillor Bob Jones to be substitute.
Councillor King, thank you. Councillor Clark? None, thank you. Ian? No, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I move that Council approve the proposed changes. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Any abstentions? None. Right, we move to members' questions, and non-operational questions have been received from Councillors Dalton and Wayman. The questions are contained on pages 9 to 14. Councillor Dalton, you received a written response. Do you have a supplementary? No supplementary. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Wayman, you have received a written response. Do you have a supplementary? Councillor Wayman, find a mic. There we go.
Thank you. Yes, I do have a supplementary. I just wanted to say that this county has an enormous number of listed buildings and ancient monuments. It is our heritage and it should be conserved. It also has it is also an enormous contributor to our tourist economy. Apart from the obvious draws of Avebury, Stonehenge, Salisbury Cathedral, Stourhead and Longleat, it is the smaller domestic heritage of places like Castle Combe, Laycock, Malmesbury, and the cores of many of our towns and villages that draw in visitors alongside the sweeping landscapes of our beautiful county. So I believe that we have a duty to our heritage, and that should include a strategy for buildings at risk. My question has not been answered, which is a shame. We don't have a strategy. We should have a strategy. All we have at the moment is an ad hoc approach where we may or may not intervene with our buildings at risk. So commenting on English Heritage's lack of resources is a pretty poor deflection from our lack of a strategy. So I ask again that we have a strategy for the protection of our heritage for our buildings at risk. Thank you.
Councillor Clure, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. Historics England, lack of resources are a problem in making headway on this, and we are required to be involving them when it comes to the actual steps that need to be taken to preserve buildings that end up in this state. I agree they shouldn't happen and that we need to take action, but we are reliant at this point on an external body. We were making some headway just before COVID. Lockdown came. I was pushing extremely hard to get some action taken on, as Ian will be aware, one of the old Sarum hangars, which is similarly in a state of disrepair. But we are not able to arbitrarily act alone. I will go away and discuss with officers whether we can draw something up, because I entirely share your point of view. We need to protect listed buildings and heritage assets. We absolutely do.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Clure. I'm afraid I have to return very briefly to item 12. Councillor King, I understand there is another small amendment.
Apologies for my error, Chair. The actual review committee and Councillor Paul Sample off, Councillor Ian Thorne on.
Thank you very much indeed. I move that Council approve that additional proposed change.
I'll second that.
All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against, no. Those abstaining, please indicate. I'm very pleased, councillors, I have no further or part 2 items, so that concludes today's business. Have a lovely Christmas.